Good evening. I'd like to welcome everyone to the March 9th public session of the Garrett County Board of Education. We are pretty close to being on time. We apologize for being a few minutes late, but again, I'd like to thank everybody for coming to tonight's session. If you would please stand for a moment of silence, and followed by the Pledge to Allegiance led by our student board member, Mr. Jared Miller. Thank you.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Thank you, Jared. There is one deletion from tonight's agenda. There will be no approval for consent agenda this evening, as there was no personnel action needed to be considered. So we'll take a motion to approve the agenda.
Let's move to approve the agenda.
So moved by Mr. Paul, Dr. Paul, to approve the agenda, seconded by Mr. Van Sickle. Discussion? Those in favor of the agenda with the consent agenda removed, signify by saying aye.
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 Those opposed, nay. And it is unanimous. You've had time to look at the January 12th public session minutes. Are there any additions or corrections to the minutes that need to be considered? Hearing none, is there a motion to accept the January 12th minutes?
I'll move to approve the minutes.
Dr. Paul moves, seconded by Mr. Glatfelty to approve the January 12th minutes. Are there any discussion? Hearing no discussion, those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. And the January 12th public session minutes are approved. I'll now ask the superintendent to read the closed session summaries and announcements.
All right, thank you. The Board of Education met in executive session on Tuesday, January 12th, 2021 at 3:05 p.m. under Authority 3-305 of the General Provisions article of the Annotated Code of Maryland to discuss the following items: review of executive session minutes, personnel topics pursuant to 3-305B1, negotiation topics pursuant to 3-305B9, legal topics pursuant to 3-305B7, and administrative function topics. Rodney Glatfelty made a motion to move to executive session, and Monica Rinker seconded the motion. Thereafter, the board unanimously voted to close the session with a yay vote from Rodney Glatfelty, Monica Rinker, Matthew Paw, and Jason Van Sickle. The topics discussed in the closed session included the following: presentation on healthcare outlook. Representatives from CBIZ Employee Benefits Division provided an update on the Garrett County Employee Healthcare Plan. Dr. Jane Wilderson, Director of Human Resources, and Mrs. Allison Schweitzer, Director of Finance, provided the board with a multi-year financial analysis of the healthcare trust. The board considered this information but did not take any action on these topics. Executive session minutes. December 7th, 2020 executive session minutes. The board discussed the minutes. Matthew Paw made a motion to accept the minutes. Rodney Glatfelty seconded the motion. Final resolution, motion carried with 3 votes. Yay for Monica Rinker, Rodney Glatfelty, Matthew Paw. Abstain, Jason Van Sickle. December 8th, 2020 executive session minutes. The board discussed the minutes. Matthew Paw made a motion to accept the minutes. Monica Rinker seconded the motion. Final resolution, motion carried with 3 votes. Yay for Monica Rinker, Rodney Glatfelty, Matthew Paw. Abstain, Jason Van Sickle. December 9th, 2020 executive session minutes. The board discussed revisions to the minutes. Matthew Paw made a motion to accept the amended minutes, and Rodney Glatfelty seconded the motion. Final resolution, motion carried with 3 votes. Yay votes from Monica Rinker, Rodney Glatfelty, Matthew Paw. Abstain, Jason Van Sickle. Mr. Wood stated that Mr. Van Sickle abstained from voting on the December minutes as he was not in attendance at those meetings. Personnel. Dr. Wilderson provided an update on a recently hired non-certificated staff person. The update was an informational item, and the board did not take action with her goals and an action plan for the school system. The board considered this information but did not take action on the topic. Legal, Mr. Brandon Hoover, board attorney, provided the board with an update regarding an appeal that is pending for hearing before the board. Mr. Hoover explained the status of the hearing and explained the process for such hearings. The board took this matter into consideration. However, because the presentation was informational only, the board did not take action on the matter. Administrative function, the board discussed various administrative function topics. The board considered the topics but did not take action on any of those items. The board recessed the executive session at 6:30 p.m. to return to the public session. The board returned to the executive session at 8:30 p.m. Matthew Paul made a motion to adjourn the executive session, and Rodney Glotfeldy seconded the motion. The board adjourned the executive session at 10:39 p.m. Mr. Tom Woods, board president, Mrs. Monica Rinker, board vice president, and board members, Mr. Rodney Glotfeldy, Dr. Matthew Paul, Mr. Jason Van Sickle were in attendance. Also in attendance for part or all of the meeting were Mrs. Barbara Baker, superintendent, Mr. Brandon Hoover, board attorney, Mrs. Karen DeVore, executive director of curriculum instruction and administration, Dr. Jane Wilderson, director of human resources, Mrs. Allison Schweitzer, director of finance, Mrs. Karen Brewer, executive assistant to the superintendent, Mr. Mike Marchini, practice leader, Mrs. Rebecca Lewis, senior consultant, and Mrs. Liz Logston, account executive of CBIZ Employee Benefits, also attended part of the meeting to discuss the healthcare topics. Okay, announcements. All right, so on February 15th, that is next Monday, that's President's Day. Schools will be closed, no classes virtually at all. February 22nd, all staff will return to the buildings. February 23rd, that was originally a staff development. I think more information will follow. There is a board meeting work session that evening from 5 to 7 p.m. February 25th is a May Board Service Academy virtually. The board chair and superintendent relationship during challenging times is the title. March 1st, pre-K, K, and first grade students return. Some special populations of students return as well. March 2nd, progress reports for the third grading period already, and the May Board Service Academy virtual equity. The board governance role will be on March 3rd. And that concludes the announcements, Mr.
Thank you, Superintendent Baker. I think our next part of the agenda deals with National School Counseling Week, which is February 1st through February 5th. And I think Dr. Lawver is coming into our meeting along with 3 of our counselors.
Hello.
Hello.
Hello, Mrs. Glotfeldy. Hello, Mr. Watson.
Hi there. How are you all?
Great.
Hello, Ms. Baker. Hello, everybody.
Hi, Tim.
Hello.
Oh, okay. Dr. Lawver's here, I think, Mr. Woods.
Yeah, he doesn't have his camera on, I don't think yet. And
Oh.
Kelly.
There we go.
Hi, Kelly.
Hello, hello, everybody.
Hi.
Dr. Lawver, are you turning your camera on or should we proceed?
I can't find the
Okay.
icon, but you can go ahead.
Okay.
I'll hold you up.
Okay, well, again, I'd like to welcome Dr. Lawver to our meeting as we celebrate National Counselors Week, and certainly like to welcome 3 of our counselors, 2 of which I've worked with during my time in Garrett County. So I'd like to welcome Connie Glotfeldy and Kelly Davis, who both were at Southern at some points in time, and Tim Watson. I'd like to thank all 3 of you for coming to our meeting, and certainly like to thank all 3 of you and all the counselors for everything that you do to make our school system successful. So with that, I will read the proclamation from the National School Counseling Week. Whereas school counselors are employed in public and private schools to help students reach their full potential. And whereas school counselors are actively committed to helping students explore their abilities, strengths, interests, and talents as these traits relate to career awareness and development. And whereas school counselors help parents focus on ways to further their education, personal and social growth of their children. And whereas school counselors work with teachers and other educators to help students explore their potential and set realistic goals for themselves. And whereas school counselors seek to identify and utilize community resources that can enhance and complement comprehensive school counseling programs and help students become productive members of society. And whereas comprehensive development school counseling programs are considered an integral part of the educational process that enables all students to achieve success in school. Thereby, we do hereby proclaim February 1st through the 5th, 2021 as National School Counseling Week. And once again, on behalf of the school board, thank you so very much for everything you do. And I know that each of you have been members of our school system for a number of years, and we're very grateful for your service. And that being said, I'll certainly ask each of the board members to say anything that they want to say at this time. So anyone have anything they'd like to say? Mr. Glatfelty?
No, just thanks for being here, and I think it's appropriate that we do recognize you today. Your job's going to get really interesting in the months ahead. So keep up the good work, and I know it's an integral part of our educational system to have excellent counselors in place. So thank you for all you do.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Mrs. Drinker?
I'd just like to say thank you for your dedication to the school system. We all appreciate it.
And also certainly like to thank you as well, Dr. Lawver, for the many, many, many years that you've led our school system with our pupil services department and worked with counselors and many, many others during your time here in Garrett County Schools. And we certainly appreciate all the leadership that you've given as well.
Well, thank you. And it's certainly been a pleasure working with our counselors. They provide just wonderful support to students, staff, families, and parents. And we're very fortunate because they're always willing to step out and help each other or help particular schools if there's a situation where we need more counselors at the school. And knowing that they're there is a really good feeling to have. So I appreciate all that they do for our schools.
Thank you.
Well, once again, thank you for attending our meeting. Thank you for everything you do. And hopefully we'll get back to some normal types of school settings, which I'm sure you can you can do much more to help our kids when that occurs. But once again, thank you. Thank you for coming.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Very much.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Okay, next on our agenda is the Grantsville Elementary Emotional Learning Hub. And I think Dr. Miller is coming on board, I believe, to
and Mrs. Nesselrod, Kirsten Nesselrod.
Right. Are coming on board, and they will make a presentation for us.
So I'd like to begin by introducing this display. Mrs. Nesselrod has put together, we have about a 9-minute video for you to watch. And she's going to profile what's going on at Grantsville Elementary School. I particularly like the way she put this presentation together because it shows what her social emotional learning environment looks like in person, and it also shows what they've been doing online. So she's done a really good job of showing us how they are going to be able to transition, you know, when they were in person to online and hopefully now going back to in person. So I'm going to turn it over to Mrs. Nesselrod, and Dr. Miller's going to share her screen for the video.
Also, before we do that, I'd like to also welcome Mrs. Miller at Grantsville Elementary. for sharing. I see you're on our screen as well. So thank you for attending this evening during the presentation.
You're muted, Ms. Nesselrod.
We're not hearing the.
Kirsten, you have to click, or Dr. Miller, you have to click sound. You're sharing sound as well.
Hi, everybody. My name is Kirsten Nesselrod, and I'm currently the behavior coach at Grantsville Elementary School. Today, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about social emotional learning, why it's important, and how we can use it on a virtual platform. So this year at Grantsville Elementary School, we really wanted to focus on SEL. We focused on moving towards becoming a more trauma-sensitive school. We started the school year with introducing reset rooms in each classroom. We focused on teaching different breathing strategies, and we continued to build positive relationships with our students. So a trauma-sensitive school describes a school in which all students feel safe, welcomed, and supported, and where addressing trauma's impact on learning on a school-wide basis is at the center of its educational mission. The focus is on creating a whole school culture that serves as a foundation for all students to learn and experience success at school. So how can we be trauma-informed? Trauma-informed schools aim to help children feel safe, be connected, get regulated, and to learn. Relationships are a contributing factor in young children's successful academic, social, and emotional development. And it's also essential during the earliest years of life for not only cognitive development, but also for healthy emotional development. So a caring adult relationship creates the trust, safety, and resilience that can launch our students forward in life. We cannot assume that they know what the boundaries are. We cannot assume that when giving a consequence that they know why they are receiving this consequence. And we need to teach some of the most basic communication and social skills as well as academics. We need to be the adult that responds and listens when they come to us. So the more healthy relationships that a child has, the more likely they will be able to recover from trauma and thrive. Relationships are the agents of change, and the most powerful therapy is human love. So that's why at Grantsville, we decided to incorporate reset spots into each of our classrooms. This is a place for students to get regulated. It's a way for us to build caring adult and child relationships. It's a way to continue to be trauma informed, and it's consistent across grade levels and can become a safe place for students to go to and know that's available to them at all times. We also incorporated breathing strategies at our school. This is just an example in my sensory room at Grantsville. I have a breathing strategies wall, so students can go to this wall and there's different breathing strategies they can use at any point whenever they need to come there. I also created a sensory wall. At first was designed for a specific student, but then we ended up using it for anybody that needed to use it. On the one side is different sensory items with different textures and things like that that the students can use. And then on the other side is an area where it talks about the different zones of regulation. It explains to the students if they're in that zone, how they would be feeling at that time. There's a little selector at the bottom that they can point the arrow to which zone that they're feeling at that point. And then there's different strategies that they can use to help them get regulated and get back to a green zone or their baseline. In the sensory room, I have a calming corner. So there's different posters that explains to the students different calming strategies that they can use. It talks about when they're feeling certain ways, what they can do to help them feel better. So why is it important to incorporate SEL into a virtual platform? This pandemic is causing traumatic experiences like we've never seen before. Children who have already experienced trauma are being reintroduced to trauma and are experiencing even more of that. And children who have no history of trauma have now been exposed to different traumatic experiences. We need to continue to connect and build relationships with our students, and we need to continue teaching them how to regulate and to feel that there is a safe place to go to. How can we incorporate all of this into a virtual platform for our students to use? So this is when I came up with creating the Social Emotional Learning Hub. Within this hub, there's different doors to different activities and different strategies and different things that the students can use when they feel that they need to come here and take a break from their work, or if they're just feeling really stressed out at home. So this room is actually available to every student and staff member at Grantsville right now, and it's available on Schoology. It's inclusive, so I made sure that, all students are able to use this room. There's little audio icons on every single slide so that it can read and explain to the students how to use the different rooms and what to do within that room. When you go to each room, it automatically has me explaining to the students what that room is, how they can use it. I also teach live with the guidance counselor every Tuesday. And this is when I have introduced this to our students and helped them use some of these strategies in those live lessons. So the students are familiar with the strategies that's within these rooms, but it just gives them a place that they can go to so that they can reintroduce themselves to these strategies if they need to use them during the school day. The first room is the sensory room that looks like the one that's at Grantsville right now. So I have different posters that I have hanging up in my room. I have my trampoline and the swing, the sensory table that's in there. Within this room, the students just click on the different posters or different objects within the room, and it'll take them to things like videos for breathing strategies or brain breaks. There's activities for the students to complete to help teach them positive social behaviors. I also have a seasonal sensory room. I have different links to the Go Noodle videos. There's mindfulness videos, there's brain break videos, and there's also different activities throughout this room. I also have different social stories about hand washing and social distancing, and it actually has me reading those stories to the children. Then if you go back to the home page, I have a break room. So within this break room, I have a brain breaks room, breathing strategies room, and a yoga or a mindfulness room. If you click on the brain breaks, this one is also seasonal. If the kids click on the different objects around the room, then it takes them to different brain breaks videos. So these are videos that can get the kids up and moving to just give them a little break from the work that they're doing during the school day if they need one. In the breathing strategies room, I have different videos of breathing strategies. In the yoga or mindfulness room, kids can click around the room on different objects and it takes them to videos. I also have a library. Within this library is a ton of different SEL books. If the kids want to listen to one of the stories, they just click on the book and it reads the story to them and flips through the books. And each of the stories has a different SEL theme. Within the SEL room, there's different topics that the kids can click on to learn more about. If I click on the empathy button, it has an empathy room. They can click on the books and it'll have a read aloud for that story that they can listen to, or if they click on the TVs, pulls up videos about that topic that they want to listen to. Down here in the corner, the zones of regulation. Within this room, they can click on this one and it pulls them up to a video that has me teaching them about what the zones of regulation are, which zone they feel like they're in at that point. So this is the blue zone room. If you click on the little toolbox over here, it takes you to a video where I explain to the children different strategies that they can use to get back to the green zone or back to the baseline. And for each of those zones, it's going to have a different room. So this is the yellow zone room. In each of these rooms, there's a button for them that can take them to the sensory room or to the break room. If they need to go to those rooms, they can go directly. And then this is the red zone room. You have entered the red zone room. SEL is really important at this point in time just because of all the trauma that's happening throughout, our life. And this is just something that we've never really been exposed to or have seen before. So we have students who have never experienced trauma and now they have experienced some type of trauma, or we have children who have already had traumatic experiences and now they're just experiencing even more trauma. So SEL is really important at this point. It's also important to just keep letting the students know that, we're here for them and that there's a safe place that they can go to if they need to go to that place. It just helps continue to build those caring relationships that we need. So I hope that you enjoyed me showing you the SEL hub that I made. I hope that this encourages other people to really consider focusing more on SEL within their schools. Talk to you later. Thanks for listening. Okay, does anybody have any questions or anything about the SEL Hub or about social emotional learning? Yes.
So what grade levels is this targeted to?
Pre-K through 5th grade. So it's available to everyone in the school. And the videos and links that's available is appropriate for all of those age levels.
Kristen, was this a software package that you accessed that you built?
No, I made all of them in Google Slides. And what I did was you can link different slides and objects to different URLs and things like that. So I think the hub has a total of 50 slides in it. And what I did is I just put it all together and linked everything together so that it all worked together.
Kristen, if I had the ability to give you a pay raise tonight, I would do that. That was very incredible. I've watched a lot of things in my lifetime educational, but that is about as slick. That's pretty good. I applaud you to no end. That was very well done.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that.
I think, yeah, I was going to say Mrs. Rinker had a question.
So you currently have students that are able to use it at Grantsville, is that correct?
Yes. Yep. I actually just checked before I hopped on the meeting, and there's been a couple of our students and staff who have been on the Schoology page and who have used it so far.
Very good. Is it accessible to all the students in Grantsville Elementary?
Yes, all students and all staff members have access to it.
Very good.
Rodney?
Your website looks a lot more dynamic than what actually the wall hangings in the schools look like. And so the question is this going to be available for the students to use even after they come back to in-person learning?
Yes. Yep, my plan is to keep it on Schoology. And then also if I take kids for breaks or things like that, I use these strategies in person, but if the kids would prefer an online format, I mean, that would be more than available to them. But yeah, whenever they come back to the school, it'll stay on their Schoology pages. So if they're at home and they want to access the materials, then they'll have access as well while they're at home.
Great, thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Jason?
Yes, I just want to kind of echo what Tom said. I mean, your creativity in creating this and, you know, making it available to students during this virtual time, I think is excellent. So congratulations.
Thank you.
I would like to thank Mrs. Miller, Mrs. Tracy Miller, and Dr. Nicole Miller, both for being here this evening, but Mrs. Miller for suggesting that we highlight this social emotional learning hub that they have going on at Grantsville. And I know that they do have similar things going on in some of the other schools as well. But when Mrs. Miller and Kirsten shared the initial video with me, I knew that you would enjoy seeing what we have available and just seeing the depth of what the kind of work that our teachers are doing for our students. Thanks, Kirsten.
Yeah, Tracy, thank you for coming as well. And Kirsten, yeah, obviously Kirsten, it's incredible. But Jared, I think you had a question you wanted to ask.
I have nothing but commendations to say to you, Ms. Nesselrod. That was really, really impressive. I don't think I've ever seen anyone master the Bitmoji and the Google Slides and the Schoology, you know, so coherently. And I think it does a real service for your students. My question would be perhaps for Dr. Miller, and Ms. DeVore mentioned that we're doing this in other schools. Is this implemented in all of our primary schools? Something similar, SEL?
Yeah, so social emotional learning is implemented at all of our schools, and we have behavioral coaches at all of our elementary schools that lead those initiatives along with our guidance counselors and our school psychologists, and also social workers. We have a really nice group of individuals that work together to really deliver these services, and they're delivered in a multitude of ways, and certainly look different based on the school needs and the student needs. But yes, it is implemented at all schools.
I'm glad to hear that. It's been a little while, obviously, since I've been in elementary school, but I like to see all students take advantage of this because I think it's a really, really worthwhile resource. So yeah, thank you.
I'd like to add too that the behavior coaches and we have been meeting monthly, and we share with each other the resources that we've been making, and we just share on the Google Drive. So they have access to the SEL Hub, and I told them that they're more than welcome to tweak it and use it. So we all just share the different resources that we're using in our schools to try to incorporate them.
Well, bless your heart. Thank you.
One more thing I'd like to add is that Kirsten notes in the video, and I think she said again here live, that this is available to all students and all staff. And, you know, we've all been through trauma going through this, what we've been handling for the last year. And it's important to us that we note that we have these things available to our staff members as well as our students, just simple breathing techniques. And we have, we're overlaying some of the mindfulness techniques that we've learned through different venues. We're overlaying them with our new health curriculum to make that available. We're making sure that it's detailed throughout our health curriculum so that it's available to students and staff alike.
Well, it was a wonderful presentation, Kirsten, and thank you so much for all the work that I'm sure it took a lot of hours of work. And again, on behalf of the Board of Education, we applaud you for your efforts. And thank you, Dr. Miller, and thank you, Ms. Miller, for being a part of that as well. And again, thank you for coming. Dr. Miller, we'll see you a little bit later, I suppose. But Kirsten, good evening, and Tracy, good evening to you too.
Thank you. Have a good evening.
Mhm. That was amazing. I mean, I've seen a lot of things, but that was amazing. Okay, our next item under new business is seniors' last day of school, and it is an action item. So, Madam Superintendent, if you want to make a recommendation.
Unmute. Yes, so we would like to recommend, it is hard to imagine we're getting close to the end of the 2021 school year, but we would like to recommend the seniors' last day as June 2nd. This follows a similar calendar that it hasn't always been June 2nd, but it follows a similar calendar for previous years. The high school principals are on board with this date. It will provide opportunity for graduation, final exams, to make up any necessary work to earn their diploma. All testing, AP exams, and everything else will be completed by that date as well. So I would like to recommend the seniors' last day as June 2nd, 2021.
Okay, your recommendation for the board is the seniors' last day would be June 2nd, 2021. Is there a motion as such?
A motion the seniors' last day be June 2nd, 2021.
Motion by Mr. Van Sickle. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Ms. Rinker. Is there now discussion? Hearing none. Those in favor of the motion as presented, June 2nd, last day for seniors, signify by saying aye.
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 Those opposed, nay. And it is a unanimous vote. June 2nd will be the last day for seniors 2021.
Thank you, Jared. I'm sure you probably already have that out on social media, but there you go. June 2nd will be your last day of school. Congratulations.
And, I think all of us share our great hopes that the pandemic will be such that we can have normal graduation exercises, senior proms, all those things that we hope that seniors can experience this year.
Me too.
Our next order of business is Child and Adolescent Work Group presentation. I think we have several people coming on board as well for that. Good evening, everyone. I think we have everyone on board that's coming, I believe. Dr. Schwab, good evening to you. Madam Superintendent, would you like to do the introductions and the presentation?
Well, I think we were waiting. I hear from Mr. Gank. He's not in the waiting room yet, but I think he would, again, want us to go ahead. Dr. Lauber was hoping to join us, but I will go ahead. I would like to welcome Mary Van Sickle. She's our mental health coordinator. So welcome, Mrs. Van Sickle. Dr. Schwam, thank you very much. I'm glad we were able to organize this evening for you to present. And can you introduce the person that's with you? I see her name, but I'd like to introduce her if you would, please.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Absolutely.
Okay. Amber King, I hope is with it. I don't see the participant list, but Amber King is a physician assistant with Wellspring Family Medicine, and she has a special interest in pediatrics.
She's here.
Okay.
All right.
So are you ready for me to go ahead?
Yes, the floor is yours, Dr. Schwab.
Yes, please do.
I'm looking for the. I seem to have lost. Okay, here we go. So can you all see the child and adolescent work group?
We can.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
So purpose of our group is to improve physical and mental health in the children of Garrett County. The purpose of this specific presentation, I hope it's not duplicative, meaning that I hope I'm giving you some new information. We're giving you some new information. We want to educate everybody as much as we can in the county about the state of adolescent health in Garrett County. We want to emphasize and advocate for behavioral health in children. Specifically, that's what we're working on now. We need more behavioral health providers in the schools and the county in general. We understand the schools are stressed financially, so we're not specifically asking for the schools to provide more assistance, but we're looking for ways to get around that so we can help the schools and the county in general. And we want to emphasize that we feel that health education needs to start at an earlier age. We've already introduced people, so health, and the main health education seems, unfortunately, by then, children and adolescents have already formed a lot of habits such as smoking, drinking, vaping, drugs, etc. I mean, some girls are pregnant by that point. So we just feel like ninth grade is too late, and we need, and we realize this is a state, there are state laws regarding this, but emphasis on somehow in the future, maybe we can do more at an earlier age. Our group is about 3 years old. We started out through the Garrett County Health Planning Council. The Health Planning Council is a group that meets monthly at the health department. It's mandated by the state. And the purpose of the group is to help advise the health department what aspects of health need to be addressed. This specific work group started because we were presented every couple of years. There's a youth risk factor behavior survey and other surveys, and we're presented with that every couple of years. And I kept seeing, gee, we don't really look very, very good on these statistics. Um, um, the members of the group include people from the health department, social services, local medical and behavioral health providers, the hospital, school system, nutritionists, occupational therapists. So we have a wide range of participants in the group. Why did we form the group? Having been a physician for 30 years here and delivered babies, we have high teen pregnancy rates. We have a very high rate of child abuse, which I'll mention later. But in the country and in Maryland, there are rising teen suicide rates, rising addiction rates, and generally increased stress on families and schools. Monetarily, our justice system is overwhelmed by particularly drug-related cases, many of whom are teens or people in their 20s. Social services is just overwhelmed by child protective care cases, newborns affected by drugs and pregnancy. The schools, I probably don't need to mention this, but we just constantly hear from friends and teachers and about increasing special needs cases, ADHD, teachers in schools dealing with social issues that they just didn't used to have to, at least on this level, didn't have to deal with. Businesses are having trouble filling slots because of lack of qualified candidates. We repeatedly hear in the county that there aren't enough jobs, but yet there are businesses that are just, they can't fill positions, and they're good paying jobs with good insurance. So what are some of the statistics that are concerning us? For children coming in for annual wellness physicals, we're the worst in the state. Adolescent tobacco products use, both cigarettes and smokeless tobacco, were either the worst or close to the worst in the state. We don't have a lot of information about vaping, but it seems to have taken off really badly here. Alcohol, 70% of middle and high school students have ever tried alcohol, 25% before they were age 13. 23% have done binge drinking in the last 30 days. That's 5 drinks an hour for a male and 4 for a female. If you talk to the police and the justice system, methamphetamine is the new drug problem in the county. Everybody knows about the opiate issues. I don't think I'm going to mention all these things. Low infant birth weight, that's a particular interest to me. Teen pregnancy, we're eighth worst in the state. An interesting one I thought was a history of concussion in the last 12 months. 1 out of 5 kids said they've had a concussion in the last 12 months. And recent statistics in studies that have been done show that 75% of our sports concussions occur in practice. Bullying at school and on the internet is a pretty big problem, and that's worse in girls. Physical activity, we're worst in the state. Child maltreatment, this is probably the worst statistic of all. Compared to other counties, our rate is 10 times worse than the best county in the state. That to me is just amazing. So what have we done so far to try to address some of these issues? It seemed to me one of the least difficult issues to address is wellness physicals, getting kids in to see their providers so that providers can talk about cigarettes and drinking and all those things, and particularly at an earlier age. So we have worked with physicians and various agencies to try to get children in for annual wellness physicals. We worked for a while in an integrated health system, trying to more or less copy that Worcester County, a project that Worcester County has done. For various reasons that didn't fly, but it's an interesting idea. Integrated health being, rather than having a specific class for health, that kids would learn health in reading, English class, math class. For example, in math class, they would go through teaching kids about going to the store and saying how many grams of salt is in a food, how much sugar is in a food, and trying to teach kids within all their lessons about health issues. Currently, we're working with behavioral health, partly because we did a survey back in late 2019. We surveyed parents in the middle school, high school, and the children in the middle school and the high school. So we had 4 groups of responders, and all 4 of those groups listed anxiety, depression, and stress as 40% of those respondents, 40 to 50%, said that those were their particularly worst health issues. That was surprising to me. So what are the solutions? Parents should be the primary source of a child's learning. They are the primary source of a child's learning. Unfortunately, we have a fair number of parents who don't parent very well. Schools, because kids spend so much time in school, they're probably the second most important place for a child to learn about health. But there's so many other things that kids have to learn in school. It's a struggle to provide as much as probably the children could use. There's the healthcare system, but if kids don't get into the system, they're not going to be exposed to education. And then all these other things I mentioned, church, extracurricular activities, things like 4-H and Scouts, they do learn things there, but not all kids are in those activities. And health isn't necessarily a primary topic. The health department sponsors 2 websites, mygarrettcounty.com, which I hope most of you are familiar with. It was originally started for health and exercise activity kind of topics, but it now is a platform where people with all kinds of interests, not necessarily health related, can get together and work on issues together or just enjoy things together. GoGarrettCounty.com is similar to that, and it's just recently been launched. But people, the thought is that people these days, especially kids, learn a lot through videos. And I think this is primarily a platform where people can go and listen and watch things rather than read things and learn by that method. So that brings us to mental health. I mentioned the survey that we did showing that 40 to 50% of parents and students identified stress, anxiety, and depression. This survey was done just before COVID hit. So you can imagine what COVID has done to the level of stress for parents and students. Some recent statistics on YRBS, something that surprised me, they felt that the illicit drug use has actually trended downward, although we have this opiate crisis where deaths are going up. And we also have the meth issue here. I don't know it's as much of a problem in the rest of the state, but certainly here we have that. Violence, 7% of kids didn't go to school due to safety concerns in the last year. This applies to Maryland in general, it's not specific to Garrett County. Bullying is getting worse. As I mentioned before, it's worse among females and it's worse electronically. Physical and dating violence, 8% of students have experienced that. Mental health and suicide, 37% overall and 47% of females have experienced persistent sadness and hopelessness over a period of 2 weeks. In other words, every day for 2 weeks, they experience that at least once in a year. Seriously considered suicide, 19%, again worse in females. Attempted suicide, again worse in females. This last slide, before we go on to Mary Van Sickle, I had a recent meeting with Paul Edwards and some of the athletic directors and athletic trainers, because we're trying to get people who participate in sports and bands, whoever needs a sports physical, we're trying to get them to go for an annual physical to their provider, because an annual physical counts as a sports physical and is so much more than a sports physical. I won't elaborate on that, but that's something else we're trying to do with the schools, and Paul and the athletic directors and trainers seem pretty responsive to what we're trying to do. So we're in the midst of working on that. So Mary, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Okay, would you like to elaborate on behavioral health?
Sure. I think you're going to have to stop sharing your screen.
Right.
Okay. Oh my. Can you still hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I practice, and I'm going to owe you an apology. I practiced through a Google Meet to do all of my presentation, and I didn't realize it was going to be a Zoom Meet. And I've got my slides somewhere and I can't find them, so I apologize profusely. So if you can bear with me, I think in the documents that were sent ahead, I don't know if Jeff's available and he could maybe walk me through it, but I had them saved and now I can't find them, and I don't want to hold you up. And I apologize. But basically, I sent the information, I know, to Ms. Brewer, and she sent everything out through board docs. And when Dr. Schwam asked me to participate in the adolescent work group, I wasn't really that familiar with what it did in our county. And obviously, they became very evident that mental health, behavioral health concerns were certainly something that the children coming into the physician's offices were reporting that they were struggling with. So as I compiled my report,
Mary,
and look, pardon
Mary,
me?
If you stop sharing your screen, I have the presentation. I might be able to share it on my screen. If you
Okay.
stop doing that, now let me try to share
And I
mine.
so appreciate it, and I apologize.
It's no problem. How's that?
Oh, look at you. Thank you so much. I'm feeling better.
Not a problem. That's my first time sharing screen, so we all
You're
learn.
wonderful. Thank you so much. As you can tell, I'm an older social worker, so my technology savvy is not really good, and I do apologize. Thank you, Mrs.
Just let me
Baker,
know
so
when to move
much.
through them.
What a relief. Okay, so under the pupil services staff, I basically spelled out, I'm the mental health coordinator. We have 2 school social workers, one that's set up at the southern end, which is Shannon Haley, and the other that's at the northern end, which is Carrie Hook. We have 3 school psychologists who divide, of course, the 12 schools, and we have 13 school counselors. And as you can see, pupil services staff do a tremendous amount of services to our children in the schools. Certainly individual and group counseling, social and emotional classroom lessons. We do a lot of threat assessments, and a little bit later on, you'll see the actual data for that. And I had been a school social worker prior to taking this position, a new position as the mental health coordinator. So I had no idea exactly how many assessments that we did throughout the year, but it keeps all of the people services staff pretty busy. And when I say threat assessments, I include both suicidal, and I hate to use the word homicidal in regards to children, but it's children that make threats towards others, just to clarify that. We make a tremendous amount of referrals for outpatient therapy. Should a student need to go to the emergency room for further evaluation based on their mental health presentation, we certainly refer to the emergency room. The Dove Center, family services. We work a lot with our homeless and foster care children who need additional support in the school setting. One thing I also set up that has been extremely successful is our aftercare program. And that is something for a student who's hospitalized psychiatrically. I reach out to the parent if we know that they're hospitalized, and then we set up an aftercare meeting to provide case management services. And so far, every parent I've contacted has agreed for us to set those meetings up, including during the COVID timeframe. So we try to provide a lot of support for those children as they return to our school setting. What do you tell the other students when they ask, where have you been? Working on a time frame to make up their work, making sure that we know what medication and therapy services that they have, and we certainly can support them in that role. So you can see that we do a lot of different things, certainly working very closely with our mental health providers. My role as the mental health coordinator, again, is a fairly new position, and it was developed as part of the Maryland School Safety Act. So my job is to monitor and ensure that all efforts are made to track students that are in need of mental health services, that they get those services. But just to be clear, the parents still have the right to consent and must consent. So if a parent is not comfortable, has concerns, or has things going on that they just don't want shared outside their home, if they refuse mental health services, there's really nothing we can do legally other than just trying to support the student as much as we can academically, obviously. So again, my role is to make sure that the referrals are made, the assessments are completed, wraparound services are provided, and just to kind of define the crisis assessments. And you wouldn't think that in elementary school that we would have as many assessments as we do. But a lot of times when kids get very angry, they get very upset. Unfortunately, sometimes they've heard things from home, as you can imagine, or on video games or movies that are not appropriate for their age group. But basically, kids will make threats to harm themselves or others. And when a student is assessed, whether it's by a school counselor, school social worker, school psychologist, we take all of those threats seriously. We work very closely with the principal to make sure that everybody in the school is safe. The majority of the time, the staff will consult with me. And again, should a student need further assessment at the hospital, usually I accompany them, and if not, it's Dr. Martz. But we always make sure that there's school staff present until the legal guardian can come to the emergency room. We also want to make sure, for continuity of care, that what was said and done at the school setting is relayed to the emergency room, because sometimes children will, get very frightened, pull things together, and deny that they made those statements or had those thoughts. So we just try to close that loop just as much as we can. And as I mentioned earlier, we set up the aftercare meeting. So I'm very proud of that program. And I think for a parent who has a student in a hospital for any reason, but particularly psychiatrically, it's a very scary time frame. They're usually hospitalized at Brook Lane Psychiatric Hospital, which is in Hagerstown, which is our closest hospital that accepts children. So, you know, it's a lot for a parent to deal with. So they've been extremely grateful. And so I think that's worked out very well. When you look at my data, and I should have probably identified kind of before COVID and after COVID, but I'm sure you've probably heard and seen that an awful lot in any of the information presented. But if you look at August 2019 through March 13 of 2020, and as I would say before COVID, you can see that we conducted 166 assessments and we had 8 students hospitalized. And these are children that were assessed with our school staff. So as you can imagine, certainly students might have gone to their family care provider who maybe referred them on for further services. They could have presented to the emergency room by law enforcement, by a family member bringing them in. Certainly they don't all come through our services, but that's a pretty high number. And as I said, that was before COVID. And as you can imagine, things looked very different from March 14th through June, you know, the end of June. And as you can see, our assessments dropped considerably. We only had 15 assessments. And that was basically by either students that reached out to a pupil services staff member, a parent maybe called us with concerns, something that they may have written in a chat box during a Google Meet. Sometimes we've had writings and we've had gaggle alerts come in. So from March 14th, again, the numbers dropped dramatically and we did not have any children hospitalized, at least that came through our school setting. And as you can see from August of 2020 through January of 21, again, open for a little while, some students in our buildings, but again, a lot of virtual students and a lot of virtual time. You can see that we've had 16 assessments and 4 students hospitalized. So, you know, I'm certainly anticipating when we reopen in March, you know, we don't really know what the unmet mental health needs of our students will be. And certainly when we were open in the fall, the majority of the children were so happy and grateful to be in our buildings. It was a pleasure to see them and you could tell they were so happy to be back. So overall, that went very well. I'm hoping that's what happens again in March when we reopen, but we certainly know that in this year of COVID, our students have seen a tremendous amount of trauma really at all levels. You know, certainly lack of socialization. These kids have been tremendously isolated, you know, for essentially a year. Disengagement. We have a number of students certainly that have not signed on to Google Meets, not completed work, not answered the phone. And pupil services staff have made a lot of home visits and reaching out to those children. Loss of academic instruction is very, you know, anxiety provoking for a lot of these children. And unfortunately, we've had a number of deaths in our community, and this has not been a normal environment, and that there's not really been much of a, you know, a funeral process or memorial process. So, you know, we're going to have students that have lost parents or grandparents or aunts and uncles, friends, neighbors, those kinds of things. And certainly for a lot of our children, financial instability has impacted them greatly. You know, one or both parents have lost jobs, or, you know, both parents are working and now a middle school student's in charge of their own schooling as well as a younger sibling. So there's just, we don't really know what we don't know, but we're certainly anticipating our children will have different needs when they return to us in March than they would have, you know, more than a year ago. So we're looking at, you know, we're anticipating an increasing need of mental health services, and certainly the compounding traumas that have been endured can have a very multiplicative effect on the mental health outcomes of our students. So we're going to have to just be very, very cognizant of these kids need to heal. They need time to regain what it means being a student. But we're a tremendously strong community, a tremendously strong staff, and certainly a number of providers that are all on board. I've been, you know, contacting the various behavioral health providers to make sure that they're, you know, still checking on the kids and their caseloads and things like that. So, you know, it's going to be an interesting spring. So that is all I have, Mrs. Baker. And thank you again so much for sharing my presentation.
It's not a problem. Let me figure out how to not share. I think there we go. Okay.
Was there a presentation by Amber? Was there something, Amber, you wanted to?
Yeah, Dr. Schwab's on mute.
Thank you. So I do want Amber to, she doesn't have I don't think she has a formal presentation, but I wanted her to comment from the point of view of a primary care provider, what she's seeing and what she thinks are issues on this topic.
Yeah, so I'm a PA at Wellspring Family Medicine, and I see a lot of kids, especially a lot of our northern kids, because I mainly work in accident. And it's kind of shocking what we've been seeing. Even before COVID, you know, we dealt with a lot of struggles of getting kids in the door for their well child exams, like Dr. Schwam said, which I think is actually improving some recently because kids aren't in school. So they have more freedom and flexibility to get into the office, which is good and bad. But in terms of mental health and behavioral health, even before COVID, it was a problem. Obviously, since COVID, it's become a huge problem. And Mary Van Sickle has been very, very grateful in trying to help us get these students the services that they need, along with the health department. They're a huge asset to us. But it's kind of really surprising the amount of kids, and even young kids, that are coming in with anxiety. They're coming in with depression. I'm talking younger than 10 years old. Kids are coming in with suicidal ideations and we're seeing drug problems, everything that's been talked about. And that's why it's such a huge, important topic about well child exams, because a lot of times these kids, they're not coming in specifically for those problems. They're not making appointments, or parents aren't making appointments saying, my kid's depressed, my kid has anxiety. Sometimes we see that, but more often than not, they are coming in for their routine well child exam, once a year. And at that visit, it comes up, oh, I'm failing in school and I'm anxious and I'm depressed, or parents are bringing it up, we're concerned about this. And right now, with COVID, it's been so many more. I think all those cases and assessments that Mary was talking about, that they haven't, the numbers have dropped off because of COVID in the school. We're seeing them in primary care. We're seeing those assessments now. That's where kids are coming right now. And I do think once school's back in session, it's going to be right back to, those numbers are going to go right back up, probably higher than they were the year before. Kids are really, really suffering right now. So I think it was already a problem in our community, and a lot of kids weren't, just not that they weren't getting the help. I think if they ask for help, they're going to get the help. Our community is very good about that, and the schools are. But it's really, I think, trying to educate parents, educate other providers, educate teachers that these students are struggling. And if you ask them about it, they're usually pretty honest, and they will ask for help and want the help. And parents are pretty responsive to that too, when they realize how much their kid is hurting. So I'm really passionate about helping our students of all ages, not only with their physical health, but with preventative things. I always screen for, and I think all providers should screen for, not only physical health in general, but obesity, and counseling on diet and nutrition. That's a huge problem we're seeing right now. Screening for things like ADHD and how we can help our children, how are they doing in school. And then, on top of that, the mental health is just huge. And I don't think it's ever too young to start screening for mental health. It's never too young. And I think we always think about it in our high schoolers and sometimes the middle schoolers, but these kids are having anxiety and depression and all sorts of problems as soon as they start school. First grade, kindergarten, we're seeing it, and it's a big problem. So I thank you all for the services that you provide to our children in the schools. The fact that they can get counseling in school and they're encouraged to do so is amazing. And I don't think people realize that our county is very blessed, that our health department is very involved, and our schools and health department work together to provide services for our children. And not all counties have that. So I thank you all, and I hope that I can partner with you and help our community.
Thank you, Amber. Dr. Schwab, do you have, what else would you like to add?
There's just one other brief thing. One of the problems that we have in the county is recruiting mental health providers. The health department has been advertising for, I don't know, a year or two. They have openings, but they can't get people to come. Lighthouse wants to start a new program for adolescent mental health, and they can't find somebody to run the project. We're currently hoping maybe the hospital can help out, because the hospital's being pressed by Medicaid and Medicare and et cetera to do more than acute care, to make sure the health of the county is improved rather than just acute problems. So right now we're working with the hospital to see if there's anything they may be able to do to help. I would also state that I want to say that I'm proud of our schools. I think the schools in this county are excellent. Our kids received good education, good opportunities with extracurricular and all that sort of thing. We just want to see that continue and hope that this will be part of that.
Well, you're right. We are very blessed to live in a county that there are many, many opportunities. And, Amber, back to the points that you made, the school board and the superintendent are acutely aware of the behavior problems and mental health problems that come to our schools every day, from pre-K to seniors in high school. And we've tried to put an inordinate amount of our time, our resources, our finances into addressing as many of those problems as we can. But it's a county initiative. It's going to take everyone in the county and every partner in the county to overcome some of the issues that all three of you have pointed out to us. So that said, I'll let our resident expert ask any questions he might have. So Rodney, what questions might you have?
Well, you don't have enough time, but
I got all evening, Rodney.
I want to thank Dr. Schwalm and Amber and Mary for working on this work group. It's something, as Dr. Schwalm stated, it was something he took on as a member of the Health Planning Council 3 or 4 years ago. And it's I really am impressed with how it's grown and the involvement of our local physicians and really a team of people throughout the county that are looking at this. And yes, we do have terrible statistics, and we have for a while on some of these behavioral issues for youth. And I keep telling you that, and it's, I think Amber's mentioned that you can't start early enough. And I really think we really need to get in even before a baby's born and working with parents and everything to address some of these issues. And when we had universal home visitation for up to 3-year-olds from pre-birth to 3-year-olds, our statistics looked a little different than they did today. But it's all financial issues that really drive that. Can you pay for the programs that really do that early medical and educational programs? But thanks again for the team that's been working on this. And I think it's part of it's public education and getting people to understand that this is an issue in the community. And once they understand that, I think the community will come together and try to address some of these issues.
Other board members, questions, comments? Yes, Jared.
Well, I also want to say thank you to Dr. Schwalm and Amber and Mary for joining us tonight and presenting that. And I'm learning more and more as I progress throughout my term about the mental health resources. And I've always considered myself someone that's pretty in tune to the workings of the school system. So I know that there are those out there who have almost no understanding of the resources available to them. And as St. Matthew tells us that from whom much is given, much is expected. So I don't like to share this with people, but many of us, including myself, have seen some of these mental health issues, especially during the pandemic. So, and I know a lot of my fellow students have begun to watch these board meetings regularly. So I'd encourage any parents, students, and community leaders out there that the first step is just reaching out. We have such a tremendous network, as you've seen if you've watched tonight, And I'd really just encourage you to make the first step and work out, and we'll make it better. So thank you all for participating. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Jared. Monica, I think you had your hand up.
Mary, when the students come back in March, you were naming some of the different traumas, more so probably have occurred in the past year. Do you think there might be a possibility that we might need more social workers or school counselors at the school to be able to handle things?
Certainly, I think that would be, and from a planning perspective, exceedingly helpful, particularly, social workers and counselors that have a trauma background as far as treatment goes. And we're very blessed in that myself and the two other social workers and a number of other staff have all done some advanced trauma training. So that is huge. But there's absolutely, each of my school social workers have 6 schools. So no doubt, if you're at accident, you can't be at Grantsville, you can't be everywhere. But we have, again, a very, very strong team of people services staff that, if the counselor or the social worker is in one building and a need is in another building, whoever is available will go. So, but we are working on Dr. Martz and I, as well as Dr. Miller and Dr. Mangus, on social emotional learning, as well as a spreadsheet of who is going to be available, essentially what days and what buildings, particularly at the elementary level, because again, we know that these are the children that, struggle with communication skills and really, who could really put into words what we've all been through in the last year? It would be hard as an adult, but as a 5-year-old or an 8-year-old, exceedingly difficult. So we're really working on a plan, and certainly Mrs. Baker and Mrs. DeVore, have been just very, very supportive, and we need to be where the kids are and we need to meet them at the door. And we're also working on some, mindfulness activities, something as simple as just breathing. When you're all worked up and you're all anxious and you're all kind of nervous, it's very important for just take a deep breath and just kind of get in the moment and be ready to learn. So we're all working very hard, but absolutely, ideally a counselor in every school, so we didn't have to split, some of our smaller schools and geographically, and certainly, a few more social workers would be an absolute godsend, I think, to our children and our staff. I haven't specifically mentioned our school staff, but they have also been through a tremendous amount, both personally as well as professionally, this past year. So we're all working hard to just support each other and make sure that everybody's going to be okay.
Thank you. Are there any other questions or comments, Barb?
I just wanted to add, you were probably preparing for your presentation and did not see the presentation before you. But it's amazing. Maybe you did see it, and just reiterating, but you pretty much hit we had the presentation from Grantsville on social emotional learning and what the behavior coach and our folks are doing there, and what we're trying to do in other schools, and the breathing exercises, and how important trauma-informed care is. So everything you said just in the last 2 minutes or so fit right in with that presentation. So I'm so appreciative, and I think it really does show we are coordinating our efforts. We can always do more. Dr. Schwam, when I first started at the central office, I looked at that youth survey, and every time it was placed up on the screen, some of the categories have worried me for a long time. So I appreciate your work as well. And so glad Mary's been able to serve, and certainly Amber, appreciate you being here this evening as well. We still have work to do. I'm so excited to have our kids back, but we do know they will have significant need when they return to us. So really appreciate your presentation this evening.
Thank you for having us, and we hope we can work with you in the future.
I was going to say, Dr. Schwam, Mary, and Amber, please feel free to reach out to us at any time if you have other data that you would like to present, or suggestions that can help the school system. We're more than willing to make time to make things better for our students. So once again, thank you for coming. We appreciate all the information you've given to us.
Thanks for your time.
Yeah.
Okay, our next bit of information is a budget transfer request. It's an action item, so I think Ms. Schweitzer will be joining us. Allison.
Good evening.
Okay, Superintendent Baker, would you like her to explain it before you make a recommendation? You're muted.
Yes, if she would, please, I would appreciate it.
Okay, go right ahead, Ms. Switzer.
Okay, so this evening we are bringing to the board for action budget transfer for fiscal year 2021 pursuant to the Education Article 5-105 of the Annotated Code of Maryland, and according to policy DBJ budget transfers. The Board of Education and subsequently the County Commissioners must approve all budget amendments and budget transfers between categories. So what we're requesting this evening is a budget transfer between categories. The first item is the elementary reading series. So we are requesting that the board approve. I'm on there. I'm on, Karen.
Yeah, you're good.
I'm good. Okay.
No, we can hear you fine. We can hear you. You're fine.
Okay. So we are requesting that the board approve a transfer from instructional salaries of $227,000 to instructional supplies and materials for the same amount. The logic behind that is, as the board is aware, there was a new curriculum for elementary reading language arts that was approved. And we did have a 3-year purchase plan. We were spanning it over 3 years. Because of the positive budget variance that we're experiencing in instructional salaries, particularly substitutes, we are proposing that we accelerate that planned one-time purchase so that will essentially be less that we have to fund in fiscal 22. So that is the elementary reading series. Are there any questions about that topic? Ms. Rinker?
Yes. So I see where you had said 3-year fiscal period. So we've already did 1 year of it, correct?
Well, we actually in FY 20, we purchased some. As soon as the board approved the curriculum, we purchased a portion with budget variance at that time. And then we purchased this year, this fiscal year, the allotment. And so now what we're asking is that we just do the remaining purchase now instead of in the next fiscal year.
Okay, so then it would be taken care of, then the 3 years would be complete.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Jason?
Yeah, and Allison and Ms. Baker, just to clarify for everybody else, this is not going to impact our ability to bring in additional subs and teachers as we reopen schools. These are just funds that we haven't spent that we're moving over, correct?
Exactly. Our plan is to use our federal CARES funding to be able to reopen in an appropriate manner, both staff-wise as well as all of the instructional resources that we need, all of the extra cleaning, the staff to do that, as well as the supplies and materials. So those are all going to be funded with federal sources.
Perfect, thank you.
Superintendent Baker, do you want to make a recommendation separate of these two items? So if there's
I was just going to suggest that my recommendation would be to transfer the funds from instructional salaries at the cost of $227,000 and allocate them to the final purchase for the reading series in instructional supplies and materials by $227,000.
Okay, is there a motion to meet the recommendation that we reduce instructional salaries and take that money and put it into supplies and materials for the reading selection that we've adopted?
So moved.
So moved by Jason Van Sickle. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Matthew Paul. We can now have discussion about any part of that you would like before we take a vote. Is there any discussion anyone would have with the recommendation and the motion? Hearing none, those in favor of making that transfer indicate by giving an aye.
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 Those opposed, nay. And that part of the recommendation for the reading series is approved. And now we'll move on to security vestibules. Ms. Schweitzer, you'd like to tell us the rationale behind that, please?
Yes. So the second budget transfer request this evening is to transfer money, positive budget variance from pupil transportation. It's the fuel savings to capital outlay. And this is to cover the expenses of the security vestibules that were constructed at Yacht Glades and Accident Elementary School.
Okay. Superintendent Baker, you want to make a recommendation and we can have discussion?
Yes, this recommendation is to reduce pupil transportation by $211,710 and reallocate it to capital outlay at $211,710,000 to finish the payments on the security vestibules at Yacht Glades Elementary School and Accident Elementary School.
You've heard the recommendation. Is there a motion to accept the recommendation?
So moved.
So moved by Rodney Gotfelty. Second. Second by Jason Van Sickle. We can now have discussion. Are there any questions about the movement of money? Yes, Mrs. Drinker.
I just have a question. When I was looking back at when we did these, like for the one for Yacht Glade, looks like we must have come under bid, because when I looked at what we had April 14th, the project cost, and then what it says it costs here, the construction bid. So did it maybe come under cost less that we had anticipated from the original?
Yes, so Accident was under $15,864, and Yacht Glades came in under the construction bid at $1,455. Now, remember, there were the architecture and engineering fees that were above and beyond those bid awards that the board approved, as well as there was a very minimal amount of permit fees.
Okay.
But all in all, both projects came in under budget.
Any other questions? Yes, Monica.
And where we're saying the transfer, pupil transportation, the fuel, and that's from the buses not being on the road, the fuel allocation, is that correct?
Yes, it is. Yes, it's the savings that we've seen from the beginning of school until now. So we're not estimating that we're taking any fuel amount from now to the rest of the school year.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would be the next question, similar to what Mr. Van Sickle asked. It would have no impact on what we're doing going forward.
No, and we actually have in our budget narratives with our federal funding, additional funds if we were to have to run additional bus routes or any type of additional transportation.
Okay. Anything else, Mr. Drinker?
No, thank you.
Okay. We have a motion and a second on the floor to accept the transfer of pupils transportation funds into the capital outlay funds. Those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Those opposed, nay. And it is a 4-0 vote. Thank you, Mr. Schweitzer.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Our next item is the FY 21-22 school calendar, and we'll have an initial report from Dr. Wilderson as to what the committee is recommending to the school board for our consideration over the next month before we meet again. Hi, Dr. Wilderson.
Good evening, everybody.
Okay, the floor is yours.
Okay, this evening I would like to propose a 2021-22 school calendar based on the calendar committee. As you may remember, the educational article 7-103 was amended to allow boards to set the start date and end dates of school. Therefore, post-Labor Day waivers are no longer needed. So the school calendar committee was comprised of 18 members. Members included parents at elementary, middle, and high school levels, staff from each negotiating bargaining units, directors at each levels, a board member, and a student board member. A representative from the Chamber of Commerce did not attend the meetings, but that she did provide input and voted on the recommendation for this calendar. We met twice, January 11th and February 1st, and I would like to thank all those 18 members for all of their hard work and their insight in providing the feedback for this recommendation. The members on the calendar committee voted on all the aspects that I'm going to present to you. There were 14 voting members. 4 members abstained from voting: Mr. Woods, Mrs. DeVore, Mrs. Candy Most, and I did not place a vote. The first item was for a pre-Labor Day start. Out of the 14 members, 12 voted in favor of a pre-Labor Day start. Student start date, the committee is recommending the date of August 30th, 2021. 13 of the 14 members recommended that date. If that is the date of August 30th, 2021, then the last day for students would be May 31st of 2022. There were 2 additional holidays that are 2 days that are not holidays that were also recommended by the committee. The first one was Autumn Glory Friday. To honor the work and effort of the Chamber of Commerce with the Autumn Glory festivities, we recommend to the board to consider closing on that day. That is traditionally a day that we have had our schools closed for such events. The second was Thanksgiving Monday. That's a day that was approved in this current year for schools to be closed. However, due to the pandemic, that was a modification that the board made to have school on that day. However, regionally, many surrounding schools are closed. Allegheny County, Preston, Mineral, Hardy, Grant, and some Pennsylvania school districts. Whether families use that day for traveling or for hunting, members of this committee felt that most families would appreciate having that day off for their students and to travel, especially during this pandemic. The next item is for a spring break. So there was a lot of discussion back and forth with the members if a spring break should be included. And it actually was a split vote. 7 out of 14 was in favor to include a spring break in the school calendar, with the understanding that those 2 days, if they are 2 days, they would be used as makeup days. If the board voted to include a spring break, the recommendation would be to expand the Easter holiday to include Thursday, April the 14th through Tuesday, April the 19th. If a spring break is included with those 2 additional days, the last student day would be June 2nd of 2022. Now, as you know, the board can choose to, for both those days, one of those 2 days, or none of those days in considering the spring break. The last item is about the staff development days. Those are the 3-hour early dismissal days, and there are 7 that are built into the school calendar. Each month, with the exception of November and May, a 3-hour early dismissal occurs for students. The days of the week rotate so that our students don't miss the same day every month when we have those professional development days. The afternoon for the staff development is crucial. It is critical for providing professional development and creating remedial interventions for students. Those days are used for planning vertically with our staff and our teachers, and to examine curricular scope and sequences to mediate learning gaps for our students, and especially in the years coming up. This process is essential to identify learning needs at the student level and to develop the intervention steps necessary to address those needs. In addition, this time is for our staff to collaborate, to look at the SLOs for our teachers, and to have school improvement meetings to really align to the needs of each particular school. We also use those days for building in professional development aligned to that SIT plan, our school improvement team plan, and also for conducting countywide professional development. According to COMAR, we are required to build in 10 days in the calendar, and those days cannot be they cannot, those 10 days built in the calendar are inclusive of Thanksgiving Monday, Martin Luther King Day, President's Day, Easter Monday, and June 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 6th, 7th, and 8th. So when we build a calendar, we have to have those days off. However, they can be used for makeup days. So this evening, we shared the proposed calendar from the committee. There is a public comment window. The proposed calendar will be out for public comment starting tomorrow through noon on March the 5th. The board is requesting for all stakeholders to review the proposed calendars and submit any comment by noon on Friday, March 5th. Those comments can be made at the Public Information Office at public.information@garrettcountypublicschools.org or in writing to Garrett County Public Schools in care of the Public Information Officer, 40 South 2nd Street, Oakland, Maryland. The board is expected to take action on the proposed calendar at its next meeting on March the 9th. I do want to reassure everyone listening to this that the board does take every single feedback comment in making their consideration for the calendar. So with that, members of the board, I would like to ask if there are any questions based on what you've heard this evening with the proposals.
Okay, Rodney, go ahead.
So the proposal is going to be to include the spring break, is that right?
Yeah, so the calendar that you have does not include the spring break, okay? So what everyone will see on the website will be the calendar without the spring break. But if the board does choose to have the spring break, then we will adjust that calendar at that time, so that after the March 9th meeting, we'll put the calendar out that the board does vote on. Okay. That makes sense?
Yeah, it makes sense. I'm just not sure anybody looks at the calendar without the spring break would know to comment on whether it, there's a 7-7 split on the committee, and
Right.
so how do you make that clear when you present it for public comment that it's a possibility? I mean, from the board perspective, I'd like to get input from the public on that.
Right. We could possibly add a disclaimer or put a possibility in there so that people could comment. So that they know that could be a possibility.
Well, yeah, the parameters. I mean, you're only adding one day at the, you're building on a 3-day weekend, basically, right?
Yes. Yeah. I think you said Thursday and Tuesday. Mm-hmm.
Right. Well, again, and the board can certainly choose to elongate that for that 4 days, or one of the two, or none.
Right. And I don't think it would require us to put another option out there. I think we could take the current one and just put underneath those dates, put a possible other 2 dates for an extended spring break. That would work, right, Dr. Wilson? We could do it.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I don't want to complicate it. It's just I just want to make sure we get public input on that,
Mm-hmm.
if possible.
Other questions? Yes, Monica.
On the committee that was on there, did we have a high school teacher? I can't remember. Did you say there was?
There was not a high school teacher, but there were representatives from all levels of parents.
Okay, because the reason I asked, when you look at it, I believe, what was it, last year we eliminated the one parent-teacher conference.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I know that there's other options. You don't have to just have a conference. If there's ever an issue, you can contact your teacher, your principal. But from the secondary level, the conference is basically the one that's scheduled. The year's halfway over. So if you have a high school student, their course would only be the first and second semester. So if there's an issue, you have the conference scheduled, the class is already done. So I guess the recommendation would be just to contact the principal or teacher again to address it if there's a concern.
Right, right. Therefore, I mean, anytime there's a concern, it should be brought up as soon as possible with the teacher as well, or the principal to address it, not wait till, a couple months down the road. Mrs. DeVore, is there anything that you want to comment about that?
I don't think anything more than what you said.
And just the other thing is, Mr. Edwards was on the committee and it certainly represents high schools. We had 2 ex-high school principals on, Dr. Miller and myself. So we took a lot of things into consideration for the high schools, but you're right. Nowadays, it's different than it was 15 years ago. Nowadays, teachers reach out to parents almost daily with problems through social media platforms that they can do a lot of things, and through Schoology. So yeah, the need for 2 of those probably is historic.
And also the grading system, Power School, people use that all. The parents, they're on that all the time. So we have a great turnout with using that as a communication tool too.
Right. Other questions? Okay. I will say that, again, I was on the committee to represent the board. It was an excellent committee. Lots of really good ideas, lots of really, some really in-depth thoughts about days and what we should do. And I want to say Jared had some excellent comments from a student's perspective as to what the calendar should look like, although he won't enjoy that calendar, but he did represent those that are going to follow him. So I'm anxious to see what the emails are. As Jane said, we read every one of them, and sometimes we get as many as 100, but we read them all, and that helps us guide as to what the public would like to see happen.
Yeah, back before the pandemic, that was always the largest amount of emails we would get.
Right. Yeah.
So Mr. Woods, what I will do is I'll put this out. I'll put in a different color font the days for spring break, and then at the end to show what that end date would be if a spring break is included. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Dr. Wilderson. We will take action on that on March the 9th. And once again, thank you for all of your committee work.
You're welcome. Mrs. Rinker, do you have a question?
It'll be up for what, about a week before our next board meeting? Is that correct? So about 3 weeks for people to give comments for?
So the period is actually, it will start tomorrow and be through March the 5th at noon. And then I know Mr. Morris will get all that information back to you so that you can read it, okay, before the March 9th board meeting.
I'll give you something to do that weekend, because it will take all weekend. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next bit of information is a Route 40 sewer replacement project bid. I think Mr. Wazlowski will be joining us.
Yes, and my apologies. He has a annual contractor meeting with the bus contractors. I believe it's at the fairgrounds so they can socially distance. So he is going to call in. He's going to still do his presentation, but he wanted to get there to meet with them. So he should be hopefully calling in shortly.
Okay. Do you want to wait on him, or do you want to move on to another? Our next item is the JEBA pre-kindergarten enrollment policy and procedure revised from Dr. Miller. Do you want to skip to her and then get a hold of Mr. Wazlowski and ask him to be ready in a few minutes?
Yes, and he can always join us and then be ready. So if we could get Dr. Miller to do the next policy, that would be great. And then I'll let Mr. Wazlowski know to call in.
Mrs. Brewer, do you know if Dr. Miller is available?
Yeah, Mr. Woods, this is Jeff Gank. I don't see her in the waiting room yet.
Okay.
but I did message her and she is responding now. So give me just a second.
Okay, great. We'll take her first then.
I reached out to her as well, so she should be here.
There we go.
Good evening, everybody.
Dr. Miller, we moved you up the agenda for a moment. So if you're prepared, the floor is yours.
Yes, that's not a problem at all. So I am bringing to the board tonight for a first read just some small updates in regards to policy and procedure JEBA, and that is specific to pre-kindergarten enrollment. So I trust that you all have had a chance to see what those revisions are, and if you have questions for me, I'd be happy to address them.
Are there any questions by any of the board members? The changes are certainly very minor, but are there any questions? Yes, Monica.
It looks like one of the main things was the date is changed. And then the automatic enrollment criteria. I see we've added eligibility for free and reduced lunch meals, and we've added referral, example, Department of Social Services, foster care, special education, etc. I thought previously, like maybe a child had a hearing impairment or different things. So what would that fall under?
Typically for hearing impairment would fall under special education.
Special education, okay.
Well, just for clarification, we've always had eligibility for free and reduced meals as the criteria. It actually is stated under letter B. But when we were meeting with our policy committee, the comments were that we maybe needed to be a little bit more clear about that. It is actually in COMAR that we are required to have that as an automatic enrollment. The two that are required in COMAR are the free and reduced meals and homelessness.
Okay.
So it's really just the financial eligibility for free and reduced meals. When do you actually do the eligibility for free and reduced lunch meals?
So the actual forms go out at the start of the school year, but what we do ask parents to do as part of our registration process is to provide proof of income upon the registration. And when they complete their application, they include their income. And then when we do the actual enrollment, they're required to show proof of that income. And then we're able to see whether or not they would qualify for free reduced meals.
Okay.
And Mr. Germain, I'm sure would like it if I reminded folks that they can apply anytime for free and reduced meals throughout the school year. So if something changes with their job or with their situation, they can apply anytime. We do send reports into the state and they provide us with numbers that help guide us, but we can accept applications anytime for free and reduced meals. Thank you, Dr. Miller. I didn't mean to interrupt you, but
you're fine.
It doesn't hurt to say that more than one time.
Absolutely.
Other questions? Monica?
Sure. Approximately how many students do we have space for pre-K? Is it around 200 seats?
Oh, well, I would say you'd be close to that. Probably close. I mean, I haven't done the math, but we obviously have one pre-K at Route 40. We have one at Grantsville. We have one at Friendsville. We have one at Accident. So all the northern end schools have one each. And on the southern end, for this fiscal year, we have four at Broadford and 2 at Yockleigh. So if you multiply that by 20, our cap is 20 on average for our capacity, and that would give you an idea of how many seats.
It's about 200.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Other questions? Okay, it is a revision, so there's no action required. Hearing no other questions, thank you, Dr. Miller. We'll see you in a few minutes as well to join us with our recovery plan update.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mrs. Baker, do you have Mr. Wazlowski?
I do not. Wait, oh, there he is.
Here he comes.
Yes, okay.
Do you have video capabilities, Mr. Wisłowski?
Hello?
There, we can hear you now.
Oh, yeah, sorry about that.
Okay, we got you now. Good evening, Rich. Do you want to go ahead and make your presentation about the request for Route 40 sewer project?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm here tonight to request the award of the project for the Route 40 sewer replacement. I provided some information. The current sewer field has failed, and we need to replace it. So there's a project scope that we listed and a schedule. With the impending snow and cold weather, that schedule might change a little bit in terms of the timeline, but we are prepared as the school opens to continue to pump the tank, and that allowing no disruption to the school day. Okay. The funding is coming from the GCPS operating budget, and we had 4 successful bidders, which I listed in the bid tab, and the low bid was for $38,350. Therefore, I am requesting that the board award the contract to the Bicycle Excavating Group for that amount of $38,350.
Superintendent Baker, do you have a recommendation to take before the board?
Yes, this system has been giving us trouble, and we know with the return of students, we are going to have to keep a very close eye on it until we can get it replaced. So my recommendation would be to accept the bid for Bicycle Excavating, as Mr. Wisłowski has outlined.
Okay, you have the recommendation from superintendent to accept the bid from Bicycle Excavating to complete the project of sewer replacement of Route 40. Is there a motion as such? Motion by Mr. Van Sickle, seconded by Ms. Rinker. We can now have discussion about the project. Yes, Mr. Gotfelty.
Rich, have all the approvals from the health department been obtained on you, so you know what you're going to install?
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Other questions? Mrs. Rinker?
This is kind of more like one of our emergency that came up that we need to address. We knew that it would happen, but we just didn't know when. So it would fall under an emergency, correct?
Yeah, correct.
Did we have any funds left in our emergency fund that we had put away that was in the previous budget cycle?
I can't answer that, unfortunately. I'd have to check with Ms. Schweitzer on the exact amount of what's left over there.
Okay. Thank you.
Other questions?
But if we don't have any funds, I imagine there are some, but if we don't, it would still, as Mr. Wisłowski said, it would still come out of the operating budget for this project.
Yeah.
Well, it's one of those projects, it's not a wish we could, it's a have to, we must. So
yes.
We will find the money.
Yeah.
Well, you're paying for pumping anyway.
Sure.
Yes.
Sure. Okay, if there's no other questions, there is a motion on the floor and a second to accept the bid as proposed and the project as proposed by the superintendent. Those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Those opposed, nay. And it is a 4-0 vote to go forward with the project. Thank you, Mr. Wisłowski. We understand you're with the bus contractors this evening, so thank you for taking the time to join us.
All right, thank you all. Have a good evening.
Thank you, Mr. Wisłowski.
Okay, our next continuing business is the GCPS recovery plan update, and we're going to ask a number of people to join us as we have asked numerous people to come in, directors to come in case there are specific questions by board members with our plan. As they come in, I'd also like to announce to the general public, I meant to do this at the beginning, but now is probably the appropriate time. when we have our March 9th board meeting, that board meeting will be an in-person board meeting. The board will meet in person. There will be perhaps a few of the general public allowed to attend. We've not set a place yet where we will have that board meeting. We've talked a little bit about maybe using one of the high schools or one of the middle schools so that we can allow more people to come to the public meeting. But as we're returning to schools with our students, staff, and everyone else, we thought it was very appropriate that the board also return to in-person board meetings. So I look forward to seeing people face to face and no more of this virtual things that we've all got accustomed to. And I try to have a regular board meeting on March the 9th. But we will certainly put all of that in the media to tell you when and where that's going to take place. Okay, with that being said, Superintendent Baker, the floor is yours.
Yes, and thank you, Mr. Woods. We do have a special meeting, a work session on February 23rd. I believe we said that would still be virtual, but our next regular meeting, right, will be
correct.
Mask to mask, face to face as well. So very, very much looking forward to that as well. I do want to introduce a couple of people that have joined us. Mr. Paul Edwards, he is our Director of Secondary Education. Dr. Nicole Miller, who you met earlier, is our Director of Elementary Education. And Mr. Scott Germain is our Supervisor of Food and Nutrition Services. So I have a few comments to make, and I may even share my screen again because I want to share, I discussed it briefly at the last meeting, but we've had a couple of people ask us, what changed significantly from the January meeting when we really discussed the metrics to the February meeting, and or I guess to the February 2nd meeting. And working with Mr. Troutwine, he has helped us, our team, keep track since that board meeting on January 12th to really look at those trends. And I think I can share my screen in a few minutes, but I do have some comments that I wanted to say first. Then we can open it up to our folks on the screen if there are any other questions that I don't cover. The first thing, and as I did at the last meeting, I've kind of broken it into several categories that I want to make sure that I remind the public and talk about as we bring your children back to our schools in a very short order, and very excited about that. We do have a survey out that we are asking parents and families to please let us know if they are choosing the in-person option or if they are choosing the fully virtual option. We have about 700 students that we have not received a response for yet. It does close this evening at midnight. So I'm hoping that we will get after maybe the meeting this evening to see anything that has changed. If people will please get on that survey on our website and complete that, whether you would like to come back in person or stay virtual. We do realize that it's sort of a chicken and the egg thing. We know some parents aren't sure if they want to send their child back yet until they see how it will look, but we can't really plan effectively until we know about how many students will be coming back. So we're trying to work through all those things. And so we really like to have any responses of people that have not yet responded. So this is where I'm going to try to share my screen. Can you see that? Okay. So this is, and Mr. Troutwine helped us with a number of things. He had many graphs and other things, but this was the chart that we were really keeping very close track of. You'll see the first date, January 12th, that was the day of the board meeting. And the two things, the 7-day positivity rate and the 7-day case rate. So if you just look at these two columns, you can see that when we first started, the 7-day positivity rate was 15, the target is 5. And the percentage rate was 53.2 and the goal was 15. So you can see that it did start to decline, not significantly at first, 15, 13, 15, 14, and still in the upper 50s. But if you notice, right around January 21st, The 7-day the positivity percentage was down to 12, and the 7-day case rate at 37. Then it went to 11, 10, 8. And then if you look on January 27th, the 7-day positivity percentage was at 6.82. The target was 5, and the 7-day case rate is 13.79. And that is highlighted because that met the metric that the board and that we discussed at that meeting in January. Then January 28th, it went back up a little bit. Then on the 30th of January, you'll see it's in red. It did. I think there was an issue with that date. But then after that, starting in February, and I'm hoping it's attributed to people getting vaccinated, people continuing to follow all of the guidelines, you will see that starting February 2nd, last Tuesday, the case, the 4.73, and the target is 5, and then 16.74, and the target was 15. And then you'll see February 4th, we hit both. February 5th, we hit both. February 6th, we were under 15, February 7th. And then yesterday and today, we hit both of those targets. So even though the metrics were not the only factor in our decision making, you can certainly see by this chart. I want to thank Mr. Troutwine again for helping us keep track of that trend data that the board had asked for us to keep an eye on every single day. And this chart has been very helpful. Let me go on down. You're not seeing my screen. Okay. I do want to talk a little bit about the transportation. Mr. Wazlowski is our transportation director. He was just on. He's also does maintenance operations. We will have 62 buses starting their regular routes March 1st. Parents will once again be encouraged to transport if they can. On March 1st, students will sit 1 to a seat and then increase to 2 per seat after March 15th, depending on families and capacity. It will be 42 students per bus, with the seat directly behind the driver being left unoccupied. The transportation staff will add bus routes in order to reduce the capacity on the buses that exceed 42 students using spare buses. The anticipation is this will primarily be in the Oakland area to accommodate the multiple daycare facilities and our larger elementary schools of Broadford and Yacht Glades. All bus drivers and students will be asked to wear their face coverings at all times. All buses will be cleaned and disinfected before and after each bus route. And we will be doing assigned seating, and we will require that so that if we need to do contact tracing, we can easily find where students were sitting on each bus. Mr. Germain can certainly answer any additional food service questions, but I do want to let everyone know there will be meal service each day. Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday that schools are in session. It will probably look a little different. Some cafeterias will be used for instructional purposes. That will be on a school by school basis. So those students will then eat in the classrooms. They can go outside if the weather permits. They, of course, will be maskless during that time. So we will use our greatest extent possible to physically distance them. But, and right now they're required to wrap the individual items for a certain meal service. So right now it's not necessarily a hot meal that they will receive, but new guidelines will be coming out from the CDC. So if anything changes there, we will certainly let students and families be aware of that. One of the things that we did receive some feedback was our choice to go to a full day of instruction. And I'm very, again, I'm very excited to get our students back, but I'm very excited to get them back full day because some of the things that we are going to be doing with our students in the afternoons, I think will really address some of, if you've been watching the board meeting all evening and we've been talking about trauma, we've been talking about social emotional learning, you know, we will really address some of those social aspects in the afternoon, allowing students again to play together, to seek out their counselor if they need to, small group work. And we recognized our counselors earlier this evening. So they are all very excited to get our students back in person. They've done an excellent job, of course, while we've been in virtual, though we have a lot of activities planned for afternoon. I do need to make sure we do intend to have some sort of way that parents can see what this is going to look like. I want to make sure that the public understands that it will be 6 feet of physical distancing to the greatest extent possible, which is in the guidelines. There will be times when students will not be 6 feet apart at all times. It could be while they are having their meal. It could be while they are in class. We are looking at extra staff to split those children into smaller groups at even all levels, elementary, middle, and high school. But the main point that I want to make sure that I get across this evening is that instruction and school will not look the same as it did on March 12th of 2020, the day before the state shut down. It's not going to look the same. We're very hopeful that soon it will. But it's not going to look exactly the same. As I said last week, we are looking at some technology that can help teachers project through their mask, to see the whole classroom better, to make sure all students can access their technology when they're in the buildings and be still working with their teacher. But an elementary classroom, early childhood, pre-KK, it might not have a center for dress up and a center for sand play and a center for water play and all those fun things that we know our kids love, but we are trying to make as much space for our children as we possibly can. So I did want to make sure that I share that it is going to look different until we're completely back to normal. And then finally, we are starting extracurricular activities. We will be focusing on our spring sports season. March 15th is our first practice date. April 5th will be our first play date for our spring sports. And the last day for the regular season will be June 5th. And then if there are culminating events and hopefully everyone stays healthy and we can continue our outdoor spring sports, it looks like June 7th through the 19th, there will be some regional conference tournaments and championships. So that was everything on my notes that I wanted to make sure to share this evening. So I will open it up to board members for questions, and then we'll direct it to the correct person if I didn't cover something the board has questions about.
Thank you, Superintendent Baker. If you have board members, if you have questions, if you direct those to the superintendent, and she in turn will direct it to whom she thinks probably can give the most succinct answer to you. So that being said, any questions? Rodney?
Yeah, Superintendent Baker, could you talk a little bit about what we're thinking as regards to ventilation and ventilation systems and movement of air and filtration and this type of thing?
Yes. Mr. Wazlowski has been doing research on some things that will work in some of our buildings. Some have better ventilation systems than others, as we're well aware. I've asked him to immediately look into a purchase. As Mrs. Schweitzer said, there are some federal funds that we can use for these exact things. And so we are looking at making those purchases and getting those ventilation systems installed as quickly as possible. Of course, we'll start with our most needy areas with our most children, and then move out from there. But we're looking to purchase. I don't have an exact number for you this evening, but I can certainly get that for you. But we are moving on that as quickly as we can.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good question.
Other questions? Ms. Rinker?
So then being hopeful that we'll have some of these, what Mr. Blackley just talked about, the ventilation in place, hopefully maybe by March 15th, provided that we don't have trouble getting them all installed, or that there's not a shortage of them, because other schools might be addressing the same issue that we are.
Yes, we do have a number of vendors that reach out to us, and I forward those to Mr. Wazlowski. We talk about those. We do have 5 weeks. So I'm very hopeful as well that if not March 15th, as shortly thereafter as we can to get them in place, we will have them.
Talking about the meals the students will be eating. You addressed some of my questions. So I guess it's safe to say at secondary schools, the students that always look for a la carte, there'll be no a la carte currently when they go back.
That one will go to Mr. Germain. He is our a la carte expert, of course.
Yeah, when we first go back, we will not be doing a la carte. We will get to it as soon as we feel that we can make it happen, because we do know the students enjoy that part of the meals. But until we know how many students are going to be eating with us, we just need to go slow.
Yeah, but you are planning to provide meals for our virtual only students as well. That wasn't a question from the board, but if you could address it, that would be great.
Yeah, we will continue our virtual meals. We will continue on Wednesdays as long as they are asynchronous. We will do 7 days worth of meals for our virtual students. The plan is currently to pick it up at schools from 4 to 5 on Wednesdays. And then we will do 3-day bags for the in-person students with a 7-day supper bag from 5 to 6 like we have been on Wednesday evenings as our current plan. And all of that is free until the end of the school year.
Jared.
Well, Mr. Germain, I commend you for finding the grant money and the funds to do that for our students. I think it's the least we can do in these. And I was hoping you could elaborate more for myself and those at home watching on the importance of filling out that farms application. Even though, you know, all meals are farms, but it can help us in other ways.
Yes, this year is not as important for a meal application for getting a free meal or a reduced price meal, but it does affect other funding, and also with the upcoming PEBT cards, they will be distributed based on free and reduced status. So even if you have not applied as of yet, those PEBT cards have not gone out. You will be able to, we will upload a file to the state DHS for the distribution of those once their plan is approved by the USDA.
Mr. Van Sickle?
Yes, Mrs. Baker, just a quick question. As far as middle and high school, will they be staying in the same rooms? Will they be moving around to different classrooms? How do you guys see that working?
They will be moving to different classrooms. When we first started back in September, they were in learning pods, but they will be moving throughout the building. And I will ask Mr. Edwards if he wants to elaborate on that at all.
Well, thank you. I don't know if there's much to elaborate on that, but they will be moving through their regular schedule. And it's the same model that we left the school with when we were in a yellow hybrid model earlier in the year. So there has been some experience with that. And I was just talking with my principals today about different ways to facilitate that in the safest way possible.
Mr. Glefelty?
Yeah, from the studies I've been reading, mealtime seems to be problematic at schools. And it is because both the students have their masks off, teachers have their masks off. And so I think it's really important that you really enforce separation during those times. If you can't do the mask, you better be 6 feet apart. So is there plans in place to do that? Also, transmission in the school sometimes occurs when teachers congregate to eat together and they're close together and they have their masks off. So are there going to be policies about that?
Absolutely. There already is the policy for staff. No matter if students are in the building or when they come back before students are in the building, they will not be allowed to congregate in staff rooms. They are to go either get their lunch and take it back to their classroom and close the door, eat by themselves. And I know Dr. Miller and Mr. Edwards, we're still visiting classrooms. We're still working out the logistics of where everybody will be. But certainly if we know there's, a greater risk when of course, they're not wearing their mask, we will concentrate on ensuring that during those times that physical distancing is a priority. I don't know if Dr. Miller or Mr. Edwards want to elaborate on anything I've said, but feel free.
I think you answered perfectly. And I would just add at the elementary levels, sometimes that's going to look like eating in the classroom, and sometimes that's going to look like eating in the cafeteria or even other spaces. But again, our priority is to, with their mask off, for them to be separated appropriately during that time. So that's our main focus.
And Madam Superintendent, I would add to that at the secondary level, to Mr. Gladfeldy's point, which is well taken, we are looking at, some schools will possibly add a lunch shift to help spread people out. Some schools will utilize more than the cafeteria. For example, we're talking about using possibly the auxiliary gym or classroom at some of our schools to further be able to spread students out. And at the high schools in particular, probably end up at all schools, we're going to, instead of using the tables, we'll use desks, which all face the same direction, and that we can space them out more appropriately. So tip of the cap to the principals. I know since the very beginning of this whole thing, they've been focusing on lunch in particular all the way back in August, because they knew the difference there than everywhere else, and they have some pretty good ideas, and those are all things that we will employ upon return.
Thank you.
Mrs. Baker, would you, I think probably let Mr. Edwards answer the question, but looking forward to the spring season, talk a little bit about scheduling. Will we be able to schedule out-of-state teams? Will we only, to Washington County? What's dynamics will scheduling take on?
Well, I will let Mr. Edwards, I know we have scheduled some out of state, but it's a very small radius of location. So I will let him speak to that though.
Sure, Coach. So what we've done is we've allowed our athletic directors to look to contiguous counties and contiguous states of traditional teams that we've always played that have similar protocols in place as we do. For example, Somerset County, Pennsylvania, Preston County, West Virginia, Mineral County, West Virginia, Kaiser, Frankfort, Preston, Myersdale, for those spring sports. Washington County, I spoke with my counterpart in Washington County yesterday, Eric Michael. They are optimistic that they will be able to schedule us in some sports. They're on our same season. Obviously, we'll be playing Allegheny County schools once they transition into spring. There's about a 5-week period where we'll be in spring sports where they will not be. So we're focusing on that first 5 weeks of the season for some of those out-of-state opportunities, and then of course Northern and Southern, and possibly the private schools in Allegheny County, Bishop Walsh, Calvary Christian, some of those schools that aren't also following the exact same schedule. So our athletic directors, I spoke with both of them today and yesterday between them, looking to schedule those competitions with contiguous counties. And I think for the most part, it's not easy. Quite honestly, with us coming into the game late, a lot of schools have already maxed their schedules out, but there is some opportunity we're taking advantage of, and we're still waiting to hear back from some. And then, of course, Washington County will come into play with that as well.
Yeah, I know West Virginia has like a 5-week overlap where they're starting their winter sports, I think maybe in a couple, 3 days. Is going to overlap into their spring sports where they're going to share athletes for about 5 weeks, which be interesting to see how that works. So I didn't know if the West Virginia, counties would even be able to schedule spring sports with us until they finish with that overlap season. So it's going to be very difficult.
Yeah, it's going to be a challenge. I think we were able to pick up a track meet at Preston. I'm not sure exactly the time frame on that. Coach Redinger and I were talking a little bit back and forth this morning about that, but it will be difficult, and the hope is certainly we maximize Northern and Southern and Allegheny County when they come back online. But both athletic directors seem pretty confident if we can pull in some Washington County schools in that 5-week time frame we have before Allegheny County will come on, we can put together a pretty robust schedule, all things considered.
Yeah, I think it's also important to note, move on, that even though we're out of doors, masking, social distancing, all those things still apply. Yeah, I noticed, just saw a headline in a paper in West Virginia where they've limited it to 250 people, fans at any event that they have. So I'm not sure we're limiting. I don't know if the governor's limited it, but we still have to do the protocols that have been in place for a year now.
To that point, and for everyone that's watching, because obviously people are going to be interested in this, much like they were when we got into fall sports. The current governor's orders, and I just went over this with principals, athletic directors, and trainers yesterday, as well as with Mr. Warner from MPSSAA. We are limited to 250 people in attendance, and masks will be required even if outside, and social distance is mandated for all spectators. So those three things will be in place. And we're working on some things with the student athletes as well to that regard. Student athletes will not have to be masked while on the field, court, or track of play. But while they are not involved, actively involved, if they're on the bench or waiting between events at a track meet or whatever, they will have to have a mask on.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. So there's going to be a lot of questions that are going to be asked here in another month. Other questions for Superintendent? Yes, Mr. Rinker.
This goes more to the secondary level. The question was asked about the students switching classes, and you said they would be. I'm not sure what's called at Northern, but Southern, you have the Rams classes. Will those be offered? Will that be part of it?
Trevor?
That's a great question, Mr. Ranker. The direct answer is no. One of the things that we're doing to limit the amount of time students spend in the hallways, we're going to eliminate the remediation period at the schools for the rest of this year. One of the things that we are going to do to make up for that, because we do realize how important remediation is, we are going to structure the class, because that extra time will be built back into the classes, and it will take away one more transition in the hallway. So that's the cost benefit. What we will do then with that extra time and the way that the classes are structured is we'll use some of that time during the actual class for remediation, direct face-to-face with the teacher. A lot of the students, especially the first students that we're bringing in, have probably not taken full advantage of the remediation time they've had in the virtual setting. And this will be an opportunity to give a more robust opportunity for more personalized remediation to students that need it the most with the teacher directly. So that's the reason why and how we're going to handle it. And so to answer your question again directly, we will not be having those periods in the day for the rest of this year. Good question.
Monica.
What about gym? When you were saying about, I'm thinking about students when they have gym, if they're running or whatever, are they still required to wear the mask if they're being physically active?
Technically, no. But we have talked, and we are looking at, depending on the activity, depending on asthmatics, that type of thing, and how many students. Best practice would be that they would have a mask on. And that is the recommendation to phys ed teachers.
You know, incidentally, in Pennsylvania, in the Pittsburgh area, there are school districts that have mandated masks to be worn during the basketball games. They're playing their basketball games with masks on. Not every jurisdiction is doing that, but there are some that are. Yeah.
Some in Maryland as well.
Okay, good. Next question.
I have another one at secondary level. I've seen that some of the classes are large, so the class will be split up. The teacher will have half the students 2 days, and the other, then you'll switch. The other half of the class will be in another room. So my question is, when the students say they might be the teacher Monday and Tuesday in the classroom, then Thursday and Friday, they're on their device, listening to their teacher teach, but not in the same classroom, correct? If the classes are large, that will happen to a couple of the classes?
I can't speak for every single class. There could be some exceptions to what I'm going to say, so I want to preface this answer with that. But in my conversations with the principals, most classes will have direct contact with the teacher every day. You are correct that classes will be split. So if we have 30 in a class, 15 of them may remain in the classroom. If we can distance them, 15 will be located somewhere else. One model I know that the high school principals have been talking about a lot is, if the teacher has a 80-minute class and they teach for 50 minutes with group A in the classroom, they might switch with the person we have monitoring that other group for the second part of the class to, again, have more face-to-face time, answer more questions, do some more direct teaching. I really think that's going to be determined by the teacher in the class and, the circumstances there. But to say that there'll be A/B days where kids don't have direct face-to-face time with teachers, I do not think will be normal practice. I think normal practice will be that most kids will see their teachers every day. It will not be, though, probably for 80 minutes of that time.
So if they're in the other class, or will they need to have headphones? Will it be part of the requirements, or earbuds?
Yes, they will be. We're working on that. And again, that's a general answer. There certainly could be times. I know one thing Mr. Gank's working on is trying to find ways to, for lack of a better term, beam the teacher into the classroom, maybe on a TV, where every kid's engaged directly with that. Again, you will see a lot of different models, so it's hard to generalize how it will look. There will be, though, to your point, there will be a lot of times we invest a lot of money in the Schoology and that and devices, and there will be a lot of students that aren't direct face with the teacher. To have direct instruction in real time, they will be on their device with earphones or whatever. That will be a common practice, I'm sure.
Now, for the classes, we will have the exception that we might need to have say it's 30 students, not every class, some will have to be split up. Do we have enough staff currently, does it look like, to be a monitor in the other classroom?
No, we will need to employ long-term substitutes to meet that. Exact number won't be known until tomorrow, until the survey closes tonight. I've got a general idea. I talked with all of my principals today. It looks like at the secondary level, we're trending somewhere roughly, at least as of about 11 o'clock this morning, it was give or take 20% of the student body that's going to remain virtual. So that will impact how many substitutes might be needed. We do have some ancillary staff that will be used for that as well. That can help separate classes, the larger classes into smaller segments, but we will need to employ some long-term subs to make that possible.
Okay, thank you.
And that's a similar model at the elementary. I don't know, Dr. Miller, if you were getting ready to jump in, but that is a similar model. We have both directors working with their principals to determine how many people we will need. That will depend, again, as Mr. Edwards said, on the closing of the survey. But we asked Monday, I guess that was yesterday, we talked about it in cabinet and having them identify, making sure, as Mr. Edwards said, that we first look at all the staff that we currently have in the buildings. Are there other folks that can, help with, so that we didn't have to have, a large number of long-term subs, but we are prepared to get as many as we need to make sure we're doing the physical distancing to the greatest extent possible, and able to follow all the other guidelines as well.
Okay, thanks.
Madam Superintendent, I would be remiss, and I know Dr. Miller will agree with me on this. The amount of work our principals have been asked to put into this endeavor over the last couple of weeks and into the next couple of weeks, and the teamwork that they have shown working together, both with their assistant principals and cross county, to collaborate, to talk about things like lunch and social distancing and transitions and how to do the schedule and how to separate classes and get long-term subs. It has been a tremendous lift, and I would feel bad if I didn't at least say they have done a tremendous job, and the work that they have done is recognized and appreciated.
And I agree with that wholeheartedly. Absolutely, Mr. Edwards.
In addition to that, the work that you, Mr. Edwards, and Dr. Miller put in coordinating that among the principals, along with Dr. Mangus, the three of you have done a heavy lift in all of this. It has been a tremendous effort on everyone's part. While I'm unmuted, I'd like to say that we did bring in quite a few more responses. We're up to about 2908 responses, which still gives us about 675 that haven't responded. And we just need the public to understand, as Mr. Edwards alluded to, we need this data in order to calculate the staffing that we'll need, the spacing that we'll need. The assumption going forward when we start calculating tomorrow is if the individual did not complete the survey, the assumption is that they will be returning. So I just implore everybody who's listening, or everybody who knows somebody who has a child enrolled in Garrett County Public Schools right now, to get to that survey tonight before midnight so we can have the best and most accurate data possible in order to do this planning. And again, thank you all, the directors and the principals, for this push.
Thank you. Thank you, Mrs. Vore. Other questions? Jared?
Mrs. Baker, we've talked a lot about masks this evening. I was wondering if we've received any guidance from our health department, CDC, Maryland Health, what have you, on what type of PPE we should be requiring in our schools. Because from what I read, we have things like the bandanas and the gaiters, which aren't very helpful at all. And of course, the holy grail of usefulness is like the N95.
95, yeah. Well, actually, we do consult, of course, as you know, with the Garrett County Health Department. It is my understanding, I saw at the break on CNN that they do believe the new CDC guidelines will be coming out tomorrow. So we're anxious to see if they've addressed, any differences in mask use, if they've addressed any physical distancing, or any of the other, any of the other protocols that all combined, help to mitigate. So I'm hopeful that that I don't know if they will be addressed or not, but that is what we go by.
And barring any changes there, we have very specific guidelines in the recovery plan on what is appropriate for mask wear and what isn't.
Yeah.
Well, I know Dr. Fauci was on something the other day and advocated very strongly for KN95s, which you can go to Amazon and buy. We bought 20 of them, and he says that's your best protection that you can get unless you had an N95, which are very difficult to find. And I think they want to reserve most of those for healthcare workers anyway. So if somebody wants to know, that came straight from the general's mouth. K95s from Dr. Fauci is what you should wear. Jared, do you have another question?
No, not at this time. I was just saying thank you when I spoke up there.
Thank you.
Mr.
And we
Gladfeldy?
do, I'm
The
sorry,
other
we
thing
do
you
have,
could do is double mask. You could use one of the paper type medical masks and then put a cloth mask on top of it. So
That's what I do.
I just think we ought to have some PPE available in the schools for a student that comes in without proper masks. So hopefully we
actually,
have that.
I started to say that, and we will have masks available for if a student forgets theirs, or if they get theirs dirty or something like that. We will have masks available, hand sanitizer available, all of those things in case a student needs an extra one or needs one.
Other questions? Monica?
So for clarification, the first full day of school, I know that we have some students invited back beginning of March, and then the remainder, if you've not already been invited, everybody else is invited back March 15th. So our full day will officially start on March 1st, where the school is the entire day.
March 1st, yes.
Oh, March 1st, not the 15th. Okay.
With the selected populations and pre-KK and 1, that the selected populations that the principals are determining. But yes, March 1st.
Okay, so like the students that are virtual that will come back on March 15th. So starting March 1st, they have school the entire day until 3:15. Is that correct? That's the point I'm trying to get at. Okay. This
in person or virtual?
The virtual kids, I think is what she said.
If you'll be in person March 15th, but March 1st, you're virtual until March 15th, then you'll be in person. So so if you're at home, is that a full day to 3:15 March 1st, or does it officially start March 15th?
Well, we're actually working on, we'll defer that to both Mr. Edwards and Dr. Miller. We are working on some strategies so that students are not engaged in on screen time that entire time. We know that's a lengthy period of time. Mr. Edwards or Dr. Miller, did you want to add anything?
Dr. Miller can go first.
Well, I was just going to add that for clarification purposes, the expectations go into place. The revised expectations that were presented last week will go into place on March 15th. So on March 1st, our in-person learners, absolutely, we want them to come to school. We want them to be there all day. And we really would love to have our virtual only learners to join any and all Google Meets that teachers have while they're doing hybrid learning or while they're expecting virtual learners to be online. So that's probably not going to be the whole day because it's really a long 6.5, 7 hour day to be virtual. But it will be for a specific period of time. And actual individual teachers at the elementary level will be, I'm sure, the front line of sharing those schedules in regards to our virtual only learners. I'm sure principals will also reiterate those schedules, but it won't be a secret when virtual learners need to be online. And so we would really encourage everybody to do that starting on March 1st and create those good habits and kind of start strong. But definitely by March 15th, we'll need to have all our virtual learners on during live Google Meets to receive that interactive instruction.
And I would add to that, at the secondary level, the middle schools and high schools will look a little bit different, and the principals will communicate that directly to students and parents, and probably already have started that to a degree. At the middle school level, the model they're using, which I think is pretty innovative for them, is they're going to stay on the current schedule that we have in the morning. And then in the afternoon, because a lot of the students that will be invited to come in that first 2 weeks will be students who have some deficiencies, if you will. They will go back through their schedule again in the afternoon so that they will get, again, that face-to-face individualized remediation directly. And the students at home won't have to be on unless they want to obviously join in. They would not be required because the principals at the middle school have been very cognizant from the beginning about screen time and very concerned about that. And that's one way that they think they can help to mitigate that. At the high school level, and again, this is a generality. It may not look exactly like this in every single class, but that class instruction, again, you have an 80-minute class period or an 85-minute class period. The teacher's not going to teach from bell to bell. They'll teach for a period of time and then get into remediation with that group, especially that first 2 weeks where they have the students that can really benefit from that. And while they go into the remediation, that would be a time that the students at home could log off, do their work individually, take a break from the screen for a little while and then come back for the next class. But at the secondary level, they are attempting very hard, especially those first 2 weeks, to limit screen time when possible with the students.
And Mr. Edwards, I would be remiss if I didn't say as well, you prompted some thinking in my head, that the core instruction, the virtual learners will have to be online for at the elementary level. So we have that core instruction that we don't want anyone to miss, whether you're in person or whether you're virtual. Then beyond that, that's at the elementary level where we're going to be encompassing recess and lunch and social emotional learning opportunities for our students, as well as intervention times for in-person learners. However, if a virtual only learner needs that intervention or is identified, they could also jump on live if they needed a little additional. I think that's the same at secondary. I see Mr. Edwards shaking his head. So I just wanted to make sure I added that. So the core instruction has to stay intact, for all of our learners. And then the rest of the day will be some of the above and beyond services and the social emotional learning that we know is going to be very crucial to the return.
Okay. Questions? Monica?
I thought one more. So with our, it was in what the parents have surveyed, the form that you read, it talked about the attendance and stuff. So does that truly come in effect? Would we say March 1st or March 15th for people listening? It's our return to school expectation spring 2021.
It says right on the front that it's going to be effective March 15th. Those changes are going to be, we're going to ease into that while we're doing the first 2 weeks.
Okay.
Rodney?
Okay, this is it for my questions, but one of the students comes in with looking flushed and has a cough. What are you going to do with that kid? Who's going to address that? How quick are you going to address it? And then a follow-up is what type of education is going out to parents and staff about coming to school sick?
Well, and I will definitely take that one. We will continue to remind staff not to come in if they're not feeling well or if they're symptomatic. We'll encourage parents to please keep their children home if they are symptomatic or have been around anyone that has been symptomatic. Our nurses, and if you saw the press release or you were instrumental in helping with the health department and the emergency services with the vaccination and the testing, but we are going to take them back immediately as soon as our students return and our staff. So our nurses would immediately address that, Mr. Gluckfelty, and we would take action to isolate that student, call home, ask somebody to come and get that student if they were symptomatic, if they had a fever. So what we did before was, we did as students were getting off the bus, but we'll certainly work with staff to identify students. We're going to have more students in, but we would address it immediately and then follow all of the protocols as far as testing and those things. But we will continue to educate folks to please stay home if they are not feeling well, just as your doctor says, just as,
And
Thank
we
you.
have
Very good.
designated isolation areas at each school.
Well, kind of put a button to this. First of all, I'd like to strongly encourage and please encourage all staff members, get your second shot on the 26th of February. Those of you that chose not to get your first shot, I hope you will reconsider and work with the health department, work with our school system to get your first shot so that we can get your second shot as quickly as possible as well, because those shots will mean everything for us to finally get through this pandemic. And lastly, I would say to the general public, I think if you listen to this entire conversation, you know that everybody who works for the Garrett County Public Schools has done everything that we can possibly think of to make the schools as safe as they possibly can be. Anytime we see something that needs fixed, it will be fixed immediately, regardless of what the cost is or what the manpower is to do that, because you know the well-being of the kids that are coming back are very, very important, as well as the people who work there, you know, the staff that's going to come in every day. You know, we're very cognizant of the educational needs of the students, the mental health needs of our students, the physical needs of our students, and also the well-being of our staff. So I can't applaud all of you enough. You know, as a principal, I got upset when I had to change one section of kids. You know, once that schedule's made, that schedule was made. It was not going to change. And if somebody said, geez, you got to change the section, I went through the ceiling. I can't imagine, doing all the things that have been done over and over and over and over and over again to try to make sure that it's as best as it could possibly be, given that things change daily. So I certainly applaud you from the bottom of my heart, and I'm sure everybody else feels the same. The work that you and the staff, the teachers, the custodian, everyone has done has just been incredible. And I know that you've done the best you can, and we will have the best fourth term, a little bit of third term left, but the best fourth term we can possibly have. So thank you so much. Thank you, Mr. Edwards and Dr. Miller and Scott, my defensive tackle, for joining us tonight.
Thank you so much. You're absolutely right, Mr. Woods. Everyone is excited to get our kids back almost 1 year to the day when they're all back that want to be back. So everyone has worked very hard to make this happen. And I appreciate you recognizing that.
Thank you. Okay, we'll go to our next order of business. Board priorities for FY22 operating budget. I think Mrs. Schweitzer is coming back to visit us again.
She is. While we're waiting for her to join, she will be sharing her screen to do the revenue projections. And then she's just going to go right into continuing to share her screen for the portion where we're asking for board feedback. I will be speaking during that time, but she will be sharing her screen during that time. So there she is. So we're ready for revenue projections, I think.
Can I stop right before we start? I meant to do this before I ask Allison to come in. I want to apologize for skipping over public comment, but there was no public comment for tonight. There was some public comment that came in for the February 2nd meeting, but because that was not a regularly scheduled meeting, our policy was not to take public comment on emergency meetings. That comment is a part of our public record, however, and will be put up as such. But with tonight's specific meeting, there was no one who reached out for public comment this evening. But I apologize for skimming over that and not saying that at the appropriate time. But I want to make everybody aware that indeed there was nothing specific for tonight.
Thank you. Okay.
Have I successfully shared my screen? Okay. Okay, so I missed a little bit of Mrs. Baker's beginning. Is it working?
It is working.
Yes, it's working.
Is it the full screen now? There we
Yes.
go.
There we
Okay.
go.
I'm sorry. If you've been in my office, I have multiple screens because of my spreadsheet work, so I apologize. So I missed a little bit of the beginning of Superintendent Baker's opening remarks, but we are going to go through the state aid draft revenue calculations, the maintenance of effort, and then we'll switch over to discuss priorities. So we'll start with the revenue. We received these at the end of January. This is a slide that we talked about, I believe it was in October or November, when we were attempting to provide some very early estimates for the board. And now we're here with the draft. So state aid funding variables, the key ingredient is always the student enrollment. So our K through 12 enrollment did decline year over year of 137.5 students. So that negatively impacted us. We declined 22 farms students. We did increase one limited English student, but we also decreased by 37 students, the special education category. So the inflationary index that did add a per pupil to the foundation amount of 0.8%. So it was based off of the consumer price index this year, which made the foundation per pupil amount now $7,390, whereas last year it was $7,331. One item of discussion from earlier in the fall, we discussed the hold harmless and the idea that Governor Hogan really had, the ball was in his court to add it to his budget. And he did add a hold harmless. However, it is under the blueprint funding this year. In previous years, hold harmless had fallen under foundation. Then when we move down to the local funding variables, it's really very, very simplified. We plug in the K through 12 enrollment, and then we look at the education effort using the November net tax income. So this year, the Garrett County government will be responsible for a 2.5% escalator that is dictated by the state. So here's our first slide to review the major state aid programs. So for each of these rows, the state allocates a per pupil amount based upon those numbers that I just was discussing for the enrollment. And you can see our variances. While the per pupil for foundation did increase, unfortunately, the decrease in our enrollment was greater. The same with the compensatory education. That refers to the farms numbers. When Mr. Germain was explaining that the meal forms aren't necessarily important for students to be able to receive meals within our school system, they are very important when it comes to funding. There's our special education allocation. And again, this is the same thing. The enrollment declined greater than what the increase in the per pupil. We do see a little increase in transportation, a small increase in limited education. The supplemental grant stays the same, and that won't change. It is in legislation that's a fixed amount. Then there's the net taxable income adjustment, and that's based upon the fact that Garrett's wealth per pupil compared to others has increased. And then you'll see that last year, Garrett County Public Schools did receive a hold harmless, and it was under this major state aid program of almost $77 $1,000. So here is the estimated revenues for blueprints. So Governor Hogan was not required to, but he did fund for another year the blueprint or Senate Bill 1030 that went through the legislation a couple years ago. And you'll see here that there are 3 restricted pieces of funding. There's a new one called the Supplemental Instruction / Tutoring. And that we are holding that in a restricted nature because the rules of the allowable costs surrounding that piece of funding have not are not really well known. They have to be written through legislation. Once the House and the Senate have gone through the budget bill, hopefully we'll have clarification on how those funds can be spent. Then you'll see the hold harmless declining enrollment line. Last year for declining enrollment, Garrett County Public Schools did receive $105,708. This year it is significantly higher. It's almost $1.65 million. That piece of funding is contingent on the local county appropriation for the operating budget exceeding the FY21 local appropriation. And we'll get down to that maintenance of effort and the local appropriation in the coming slides. But it's important to understand that just like the supplemental instruction tutoring piece of funding, there may be some other rules that come as legislation, as the legislative session works its way through the budget bill, where there are other restrictions that we find out later through different advocacy groups negotiating different items. So more information to come on that one. Then the students with disabilities is the exact same. Our supplemental pre-K is down. We are down 48 pre-K students. So that's reflected there. The teacher salary incentive grant is here again this year, so that's nice. And then there's the hold harmless for transportation that we received. And that's really for transporting students with disabilities, because that we get a special appropriation for that category. Okay, so here we are with the local appropriations, the maintenance of effort. And there, as I said before, there was a 2.5% escalator that was applied to the per pupil amount. So that increases the county's per pupil funding level to, it's estimated at $194.16. It increased it. So when you apply that to our K through 12 enrollment, there are estimates in there, the decimal points go out, but we're looking at a variance of the overall local appropriation of about $390,000, or 1.4% below the prior year. Now, in I think most years that we're looking at a lower funding level from the county, we do discuss the idea of non-recurring cost exclusions. This is a very prescribed process per the annotated code. And it's really designed to allow local governments to fund at a level that they wish to, but not be harmed by increasing that per pupil in the following year. So that is something that I've been discussing with MSD about some possible options. The categories that are qualifying exclusions include computer labs, new technology, capital items, which must be movable. They can't be fixed capital items. New instructional programs, books other than classroom text, and other unique one-time costs. And I want to say with a big asterisk that MSDE will approve. So we are pretty much at their mercy to approve these items. So we get to the total revenue all in, and we've been playing with these numbers since October. Superintendent Baker and I have, and so we are here. We've got all of the numbers, the draft numbers in the boxes, and we have one red number here that we are seeking feedback from the board this evening in our next presentation. So we have the subtotal of the major state aid. This is going to be, and then we have the unrestricted blueprint. That restricted amount is going to stay separate in Fund 02. We do not have the aging schools in FY22. Now, if you recall from prior budget years and prior presentations, this line item had encompassed QZAB previously, and that program went away. So aging schools is a little over $38,000, and we had some catch up to do, and Mr. Wazlowski did get all of his projects done, and we're actually ahead for aging schools right now. So then we go down to our non-public placement for special ed. We believe, Dr. Mangus and I believe that this is a very good number as our budget. If you recall, we have decreased this number over a couple years as our philosophies and methods have changed with non-public placement. Right now, JRTC is gonna stay where it is. The other state funds of Alta County, this is the money, $35,000 are the funds that we receive if there are students that are placed in Garrett County from other school systems. And then we have local other revenues. That includes Special Olympics Maryland, interest, different rents from the M&T building, and then the county maintenance of effort. The last line we have is the estimated prior year balance or fund balance. And currently there's nothing in that line. So we have the variance of $485,000. So Mrs. Baker and I are interested in hearing what the board's philosophy is on using fund balance to, for lack of a better word, plug the revenue, because we had used 600,000 for 2 years. We had pulled that down to 485 last year, and the plan had been to really try to keep lowering that so that our dependency on our fund balance would go away, and we were right sizing our spending to go along with the revenue we were receiving. So for now, we have it that as a 0. And that's my last slide. So if there are any questions about revenue, we can talk about that now, or we can go over to the next slideshow.
Allison, just a question for clarification for me. If we were to receive the 1.64 million for the hold harmless as a part of the blueprint, the contingency was that the county must give an effort exceeding the previous year's effort. Is that correct?
Yes. So right here we have the 1.6. Down here is last year's number.
Mm-hmm.
So it would be this is what they have to. That's the legal minimum right here, the 27.8 million.
Mm-hmm.
But they would be required to fund at $28,170,095.
So as we look at your last chart that we just did, our operating budget chart, you are using the 27,779 as the legal amount, which takes us 390,000 less than the previous year. So if they were to meet their obligation, in order for us to get to 1.64, because 1.64 is included
right
in there, so that's going to come up roughly what, $400,000, give or take a little bit.
Right.
That would bring that 390 out of there and give us a deficit of $491,000, I guess.
Right.
Is that correct? Am I reading that correctly?
Yes.
So it's either the county meets the expectation that the state has laid forward, or we lose the 1.64 million, which then would take us down to about a $2 million deficit if we lost that.
Yes.
Okay. I just want to make sure everybody understands that this is a situation that the school board didn't want to be in. I'm sure the commissioners didn't want to be in it either, but we're all in it together. That the state has made that a prerequisite to getting the money.
And that percentage is not the same for every county. I mean, but it is the rule statewide, correct? Mrs. Schweitzer?
Yes, that is correct. So like in Allegheny County, it's only $180,000 because of what their maintenance of effort went up to, like what the per pupil went up to, and then their enrollment loss. They may not have lost as many students as we did.
Mm-hmm.
Right, and that's what I was trying to, it's not the same ratio. It's not the same for every county. Certainly, we would like to work with the county to find ways to do this so that we don't lose, a significant amount of money, $1.6 million from the state.
Mm-hmm. Correct. Any other questions before we move forward to the priorities? Yes, Monica.
In the supplemental pre-K, you would say we lost approximately 48 students. Would that be from the cycle that we're in now? Say we could hold about 200 students, we've lost about 48 of them, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. So that could be maybe the parents are homeschooling them or something, correct? By losing
It could be that, or it could be that it's just a small group of kids. Like it could be a small class.
Right.
So it could be a lot of things, and there were, we started the year with a higher number of pre-K, and as we've gone through, we have lost some because of the situation we're in. But it's that time, that period of time, September 30th, that counts for this funding level.
Right. But that is a statewide, even a nationwide trend. When you read a lot of the articles about declining enrollment, most superintendents are reporting that they've lost a significant number in pre-K. So we're hopeful that those numbers, as you predict, said earlier, about 200, maybe more, that we would see that go back up in the fall.
Okay, thank you.
But last year's pre-K was the biggest we've ever had, ever. So we had added 3 pre-K classrooms. So, what is our saturation point with pre-K? Dr. Miller and I talk about that a lot. And, it could have been that was a big class last year. And, we might have 200 spots, but we're really like consistently filling it at like 180. So we'll just, after we get back to a normal situation, we'll definitely be diving into that data.
Any other questions? Okay, Allison, are you going to share the other? Yeah, there you go. Thank you.
All right. So since she was already sharing her screen, I've asked Mrs. Schweitzer to share it for my part. And really this evening, we have a work session in 2 weeks on the 23rd of February. That will be when we really dive into, as I've done in the past, tied budget priorities to the goals of the school system, the goals of the superintendent, the goals of the board. But tonight it really is a 30,000 feet. We would like some input from the board, but certainly understanding those revenue numbers, are a lot to digest. So we would like to take some information back this evening from what you share with us. This is a very short part of the presentation, but certainly know that on the 23rd, we would really be working through a lot more of these priorities. So you can scroll up to the graphic. So on this budget development process, and I have to put my glasses on because I don't know how to Zoom on my, there you go. That's fine, that's fine. So, and I've outlined it in subsequent slides, but if you see the very first thing that we do every year is do internal planning. We work with our principals, we work with our different departments, we do needs assessment, and we look at initiatives that we know we want to continue. The big three always comes to mind of the last couple of years. And so that process has been in place for quite some time. And then we work on defining our priorities, and you'll see coming up, I think this year is the priority, of course, is the reopening and recovery of instructional time when we get our students back full time. The next step would be the formulation of the budget, taking some information back from this evening and from the 23rd, and formulating a draft budget. And then at that time, the board will review it, make amendments, things that they want to change, suggestions that they have. Certainly, we take all of those into consideration, and then continue to, throughout as we just did this evening, continue to monitor the outcomes, analyze variances, where we need to make adjustments throughout the school year. That's always an ongoing process. And as you can see, it's a circle. It just continues on into the next year. So tonight, if you want to scroll up to the next one. So as I said, step one, we started the internal planning in November. That was getting the stakeholder input. We always have individual school meetings with each principal. They can talk about their cabinet needs. They can talk about their instructional needs, their staffing needs. Cabinet, as you know, that's that you met most of those folks tonight. And the lead meetings are the other instructional supervisors as well. And then the principals do submit their budget requests to finance, their IT requests, and of course the capital facilities and maintenance requests. And you can see the list of folks that make up the cabinet team and the list of folks that make up the lead team. Some are shared, the instructional folks are on both. So the next step was in January, really looking, as Mrs. Schweitzer does every year, at the preliminary draft calculations. She is usually, when we do the preliminary drafts, very, very close. As you know, the state legislative session has begun, and we always look every year at legislation that will impact the budget, and we try and share those with the board as those come up, and significant impacts. For instance, in years past, there has been legislation to increase school psychologists, one for every building. That has never passed. With schools varying in our size, of some very small schools with some very large schools, that one would be very difficult to implement. So, but those are the kinds of things we're looking at all through January and February. So February, this is the part where we start the transparent part and get community engagement, ask for your feedback from the board. And you can see the website there where you can go to budget development on our website. Next one. So in between step one and step two, internally through our starting of our strategic planning process, as I just stated a couple of minutes ago, the main budget goal for me this year and for the school system as we start building this and get your feedback is really that COVID effect on the needs of students. And we know some of the needs, we won't know all of them until we get them back full time, but academic achievement, meeting students where they are, and that can be with remediation, with enrichment, summer programs, and certainly school year programs for the upcoming 21-22 school year. Mental health needs. Mrs. Rinker asked earlier of Mrs. Van Sickle if additional mental health folks would be helpful, and of course they would be. Additional counselors, we've really tried to right size those and work towards reducing their caseload. But certainly this will be an area in which we'll need to focus, and certainly behavior intervention. We always look every year as we develop the budget at all departments, and certainly increasing efficiencies where we can, and any continuing and new initiatives that we want to implement. This year, there's, every budget year, there's always a lot of unknowns. This year, we're trying to maximize those federal dollars with our operating budget and try and get every available dollar with other funding sources to meet the immediate needs when our kids return in person, and things that will need to continue virtual things, so really the budget priority for me is absolutely on meeting all of the needs of the whole child for recovering from the COVID effect. Next one. So tonight, this is the step 2 on the circle. And again, we're just seeking feedback from the board this evening. This will give us the start of how we want to allocate our funds, strategically plan for this year and beyond. We've talked a lot about standing up some really good summer programs, but we're going to be continuing into this entire school year, and probably at least 1 or 2 more school years before we see the pandemic. And then again, we're not really expecting you to have a lot of budget priorities this evening, because obviously you did just receive the revenue and really need to digest that, I know, but we would like some feedback from you on some things that you were expecting or that you would like to see in this budget. Next one. And then, as I mentioned earlier, the February 23rd, that was still part of step 2 in defining our priorities. That's when I'll present from all departments. All of the cabinet will be here on screen to, as we did this evening, answer questions, but everybody will be here from each department. We'd like to finalize your priorities and again, align those with the Board of Education goals. And then we will need to finalize our funding. As we said earlier, that 390 is going to be very important above their requirement. So that night we would need to finalize our funding request, because it's due March 1st, I believe. And then our budget presentation, I think, is scheduled for mid-March to the commissioners. Next, Mrs. Schweitzer. So that's what we're looking for this evening. You can leave it on thank you, but we can certainly scroll back if anybody has questions or would like to start the initial feedback for this upcoming budget.
Allison, would you care to get rid of the screen share so we can see everyone's faces as we talk?
Thank you.
Thank you. Questions, concerns, ideas, suggestions for the upcoming budget process? And again, I know this is probably going to be more food for thought in a couple of weeks, but ideas. I will start with a couple of ideas. I know we talked about educational specs for looking forward with our commitment to looking at the footprint of Broadford and Southern Middle. But as we get through those educational specs, we're going to have a feasibility study that we're probably going to have to do sometime in the early fall. So obviously that's going to have to be incorporated into our budget as to a feasibility study, the cost of that study, which hopefully won't be that great, but certainly there are things that we're going to have to see. Another area that either would be looked at with this year's budget or the budget beginning in July. Both high schools have lost all of their income in terms of extracurricular activities. Northern had one football game, I suppose, and there might have been a soccer match at either school, but in essence, they've lost all of their income. Now, granted, there's not been a lot of expense. There will be spring expense, though, that they're going to incur with no income. The other part of that I think we need to make sure that we understand, too, is when you put that football helmet on one time, now you've got to send it away and get it NOCSI approved, or it's an illegal helmet. So all of those reconditioning things still have to be done. And those run into thousands and thousands of dollars for both high schools. So I think we're going to have to consider how are we going to help out both high schools going forward, either with this year's monies, if the monies are available, or at least in next year's budget. So that's something I think we're going to have to come to grips with, that we can't leave them out to dry with no income.
Those helmets have been sent out. They've already been sent for their conditioning. So you're absolutely right. That is an expense. They've already been sent out, and we'll come back and will be a significant expense for the football program.
But that's a board expense. The Board of Ed pays for that.
All right. Well,
okay. Entirely.
Yes.
I know we make an allotment, but I'm not sure that allotment is the entirety of that cost. I don't know. I mean,
right. We pay 100% of whatever invoice it is that they send us. Okay. So if there are multiple invoices that I don't know, but we'll look into it.
Well, and it may be that we're not offering that much, but I do think it's something we have to look at. We have to see where we are with that, because right.
That's not the only expense that they'll have for sure. So.
Sure. And the last thing that I have is, I think it's incumbent upon all of us to ensure that every penny given to us through CARES Act monies, pandemic monies, is spent. We leave absolutely not one penny on the table. It's important for us to get everything that we would possibly need for remediation, for summer feedings, for picking up students to bring them to bring them to remediation, anything that we would possibly need to get us through the pandemic that the federal government is offering us monies to do. And I know we will, but I think that's an important priority moving forward, that money gets spent, thereby allowing us to perhaps have other monies that we can buy other things that we've needed for a long time, but now the money may be available to buy those things.
Yes.
So that's my 2 cents.
Thank you. Yeah. And luckily, a lot of those are over multiple years, so that we can plan forward and access every dollar available. Okay, other feedback this evening?
Monica?
Do you see anything coming our way that might be mandates that we have to do that are unfunded like we normally get?
Well, that's where we look at the legislation. There could be. We look at all of that pretty closely. Right now, I'm not aware of anything that's out there that would be there's a couple of things that we're watching that could possibly, but nothing specific right now that has been put in place.
There's some legislative initiatives related to required curriculum that you have to put in place. Whether those will pass or not, I don't know. Things like curriculum on Black history, African American history, those type things.
Absolutely are. There is some concentration on that. There's also, I think like our priorities, though, I think most people are trying to concentrate on where our students will be and trying to address the recovery efforts too.
Generally, MABE opposes those type things because they don't want the legislature mandating curriculum. They think that's something MSDE needs to do and local boards need to do. But I think it was a split vote this time, so there was no position on that.
Yeah, and that's certainly the way we feel about it as well. But you know, they'll pass what they're going to pass, and then we'll put it in place if necessary.
But Monica's exactly right. You can't really anticipate what the legislature is going to do, and usually when they want you to do something, they don't provide funding to do it.
Not very much, or they'll provide funding for the first year or the first 2 years, and you know, it's a program that you have to find money then subsequently to sustain that program. That usually happens more often than no funding. I mean, well, there is a lot that have no funding, but sometimes it's just a year or two, or the grant is to get you started, and then you have to plan for it in subsequent years as well. So, very good point.
Are we going to need any specific training money for some of the behavioral interventions and really to get the teachers on board with the program?
Yeah, so actually right now we're actually using our Maryland Center for School Safety FY21 grant to fund professional development for our teachers. So Mrs. Van Sickle has been spearheading that along with Dr. Lawver. And so they're working on that, and we've been able to use that state funding source to do that. So
you have enough money in there to do that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And just as we've talked about before, we're trying to spend that money, you know, before we spend our operating dollars. But you know, as we've talked about the last couple of years, behavior intervention is still a priority. And I do anticipate that there will be a significant amount of additional training that will be required. Restorative practices and things that we really need to concentrate on in the next couple of years.
Mm-hmm. Monica?
Just as you stated, Ms. Baker, things that are important to me, the main thing is getting the students all back on track where they need to be from the COVID, whether it be we need to get more staff, we need to get more, we need to enhance the programs we have, we need to evaluate them and see, you know, where their weaknesses are and focus on them. But it's basically getting us back to where we need to be from this year that we've lost in their education.
Thank you. You're absolutely right.
Anything else? Okay.
Need to think about this a while.
Yeah, well, and I think it was just for information more tonight than anything. I think we can get into a deep discussion on the 23rd as to what we think it should look like in terms of just an overview of our upcoming budget. If there is nothing else, I'm going to ask Allison just to stay, and we'll skip around a little bit. And we'll go to the audit firm selection, which is an action item for tonight, and then she can head home and tuck her kids in.
I was going to let Jason do that.
That's why I'm going to send you home. I know Jason too well.
Okay, so this evening we are asking for action on the board's contract for an annual audit. And the superintendent and I are recommending that the board retain the Rodehaver Group. And I've outlined the expenses that our audit will cost. It is a little bit higher this year due to the COVID grants or the federal CARES money. There are two actual pieces of funding that we received. There's funding through the CARES Act that came through as ESSER. And then there was another piece of funding that was also CARES Act, but it was the Coronavirus Relief Fund. So that's CRF. So because those two funds were both over $750,000, they become a special program that must make our single audit longer. So.
Sure. Okay, Superintendent Baker, do you have a recommendation?
Mrs. Schweitzer said, we are recommending that we retain the Rodehaver Group. We have an excellent working relationship with the Rodehaver Group. They provided excellent audits for us in the past, and we anticipate that they will again, they're with us quite a while, but they always provide us a very good service. So my recommendation would just be to stay with the Rodeheaver Group.
Okay, the recommendation is to retain the Rodeheaver Group for our yearly audit. Is there a motion as such?
I make a motion to continue with Rodeheaver.
Motion by Dr. Paul.
Second.
Seconded by Ms. Rinker. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed, nay. And the Rodeheaver Group is retained. Thank you, Allison, for all your work tonight.
Yes, thank you very much. Have a nice evening.
Careful going home.
Thank you.
Student board member. We're good. Jarrett.
Hello. Well, I know it's late, so in the words of Henry VIII to his many wives, I won't keep you for very long.
Yeah, I just finished that series. That was a pretty interesting series on Henry VIII.
Beheaded, died, however that rhyme goes. Well, anyway, I thought it was really interesting that we took so much time to talk about mental health tonight, because that is
You're muted, Jarrett.
Oh, that is embarrassing. How many years, how many months have I been doing this?
Hit the wrong button.
We heard the Henry VIII part. We didn't hear you started to say.
You should have just ended on that. That was a pretty good ending.
I think I stole that one from Reagan. Well, anyway, I'm glad to be able to talk to you tonight about mental health, and that is the focus of my small report. That is what the student body has been dealing with in one way or another, and it is convenient that was the topic of many of our conversations tonight. The Garrett County Association of Student Councils.
We heard Henry VIII.
That's the studio coming in. The Garrett County Association of Student Councils has made it a top priority of its executive board and its General Assembly to address the mental health issues that we're seeing now and provide long-standing infrastructure for the future. One way we did this, since I spoke to you last at the last regular board meeting, was creating a simple 4 or 5 question survey with questions that we believe give us good metrics on the state of mental health in our community. We began with a pilot program of just the student council members from each of our 4 member schools, and then we expanded that to distribute it to the administrators of each school, the principals, what have you. And we've received currently over 800 responses. So we have some very clear trends. We are still analyzing that data. And of course, we gave a section for, additional comments. So we have some stories to read, and we'll be able to report back more on that at our General Assembly coming up. We've worked very extensively with the mental health coordinator, Ms. Van Sickle. Presumably there's a relationship there, Jason. But it has been great. And we have a General Assembly coming up where we're going to have a panel of our mental health resources and some folks from other parts of the state present workshops on responding to mental health issues in yourself and your peers to our student leaders in GCASC. And we will, and they can hopefully take that back to their constituents. And maybe we can make this more of a grassroots effort in breaking that mental health stigma that plagues us so very often. So I'm hoping that we can get the word out about our mental health resources. They're extensive, they are large. From my experience in the school system, we are reaching some point of equilibrium with our assignments. I have a pretty heavy course load. I didn't catch the senioritis, at least not yet. And I found that routines are so incredibly important. But I think even more important than a good routine is positive feedback. I can't tell you how far a little excelente in Spanish class or a good job in calculus can go in making you feel appreciated, that your work is being read. And I'd encourage any teachers listening tonight, that is a wonderful way to increase your engagement. We may not show it all the time because that's a difficult thing to do, but that really helps. So that's about all I have for tonight. I think we're going to see some significant improvement in the coming month returning to school. I hope and pray we do it successfully. I think we will do it safely, and I'm glad to be of assistance in any way possible as we continue. So thank you very much. I'll answer any questions.
Thank you, Jason. Any questions for Jason?
Jared.
Jason's my father there, Mr. Woods.
Hey, what
I'm sorry, Jared. If it had been your father, I would have been screaming. Just remember that. If it had been your father, I'd have been screaming at him.
So what feedback are you getting from the students about the return to school? And any apprehension? Are they happy? I mean, what's your take on that?
So I've spoken with people on both extremes, people that believe we should have been back since September full-time, 5 days a week, 8 hours a day. And there's some inner part of me that wants to do that too. Of course, I'm a senior. And I've also spoken with folks that would preferably lock down until we can have, full herd immunity, what have you. And I really do believe that and the consensus is among my peers that I've spoken to is that this is a good compromise. It offers something to everyone. For the first party I mentioned, it offers 8-hour instruction, socialization in person, 4 days a week. And for those who would prefer to stay at home, they find virtue in the increased participation requirements and in the blue model. We're calling it now the virtual only model. I think they find that to be a very useful thing. Because I'll tell you now, Mr. Gladfeldy, there's a bit of a stigma around participating in class, and as silly as that might seem, you don't want to be the only one with your camera on, and you don't want to be the only person speaking with your microphone on when everyone else is using the chat. I don't know how exclusive that is to secondary students or not, but I think that the blue model will do a better job of addressing this with the increased attendance requirements in the future, and I think it'll be as close to synchronous truly as possible.
Well, part of the great thing about going back to school is interacting with your peers and the socialization, and it's not going to be the same thing. Everybody realizes that, right? It's like there's going to be social distancing, masking, all those type of requirements. So it'll take a period of adjustment, I think, and I hope the students get on board with this.
It will, and I think they will. I think some is better than nothing, and I think it's something to work towards. I think even talking through a mask 6 feet apart is a lot better than talking through a screen 30 miles apart. So I think it's going to be good. And I appreciate that we built in time for socialization.
I appreciate that perspective. Thank you.
I think like anything else, we'll have students that really embrace it and students that need a little bit more time to transition. My hope is that it will be very smooth and we'll have it looks like it's trending, like a lot of kids are coming back. Very excited about that. Jared, I know you said you were going to share the results at your meeting. I would be very anxious to see the results and see what the kids are saying. And, Jarrett asked for the link for the survey to send that out right away. So we got that link for him for him to share with his peers and families. So, if we can work together I'd really like to see this, see the results as well.
Certainly, and we can invite you to the General Assembly. I think as a member of the Executive Board, I can give you the authority to come if you'd like.
Pretty much, I can come. Just need to make sure to let me know when it is. So certainly. That would be great. Thank you so much.
Any other questions for Jared?
Have you still been having your student council meetings virtual?
Yes, we are one of the few activities that have stayed engaged. I'm very fortunate. I've been two of the very few that have stayed engaged, mock trial and student council. We have them on the Wednesday asynchronous in the morning. That's just a convenient time for all of us. And that's for my personal school council. I believe Northern's doing something very similar. And we've stayed engaged. We've done 2 very successful fundraisers on the southern end. Northern end has done even more. And 2 very successful Spirit Weeks, I should mention. We've seen a very high degree of participation in our virtual Spirit Weeks. And you can go to our high school's Facebook pages to see the results of that. So we're still doing that.
Other questions before Jared leaves us with a Reagan? Okay, Jared, it's all yours.
Well, that's the only one I've got tonight. I'll save them for.
Oh, should have saved that Henry VIII one then. Great job, Jared. Thank you so much for everything you're doing for all the kids in our county. We certainly appreciate it. You've been an incredible asset to the school system. We appreciate it very much.
Thank you, Mr. Woods. I appreciate that.
Okay, are there any any board member reports that they would like to bring forward? Well, hopefully in the months to come, we will have some things that we can say that we visited a school or we went to a function of some type. So hopefully that'll change in the very near future. I'm sorry.
You just said hopefully. I agreed with you.
That being said, we're now going to move back to executive session. For those of you that are watching, we have some unfinished business to do. So we'll be leaving this site and logging into a different Zoom. Again, thank you, those of you watching. And once again, I'd like to remind everyone, if anyone is still out there, that the March 9th meeting will be an in-person meeting. We will let you know where it will take place. It will be at the usual time, I'm sure, at 4 p.m. We will try to make that available to as many people as possible. I'll see, Brandon, would you come in that meeting with us for just a few minutes, please? And everyone else, I'll see those of you that are coming back to the meeting in, let's say 10 minutes. I've got 10 o'clock, 10 after 10, we'll reconvene. Thank you. Jeff Gank, will you make me the host for that executive session?
Yeah, I'll work with Karen Brewer on that. I believe she created that one, but we'll take care of it.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Okay, thanks.